Fallout 2, bigger and better than the last. At least that's what they were selling to you when it was released. I recently had someone tell me that Bethesda doesn't understand Fallout, and if you think that's true, wait until you play Fallout 2 for the first time. A game whose only goal was to be grander than its predecessor, Fallout 2 adds a lot to the series as a whole while feeling directionless and like it's missing the conciseness, complexity, and messaging of the first entry. That's a pretty bold claim to start the video off with, but stick around and I'll show you that the evidence is there, both within the game itself and within the tumultuous development history that led to the original creators Tim Kaine, Leonard Boyarsky, and Jason Anderson stepping away from the game and company entirely. It was a mess from start to finish, full of crunch and decisions that were left in the game without feeling like they belonged at the time, and don't even get people started on the talking death clause. While Fallout 1 was a passion project that looked to create something special, something that Tim Kaine had been dreaming of, Fallout 2's entire purpose of existence was to leech off of that potential success at the time, to continue making money, making something that would sell, to keep Interplay growing. But within that was a loss of direction and a loss of passion, and you can see that within the game itself. Areas that feel disconnected from one another, some too large and too empty to be justified, references to pop culture where you won't understand the joke if you don't know what they are talking about, and a storyline and set of antagonists that are missing the depth and complexity of the master from the original. Where Fallout 1 revitalized the CRPG genre, Fallout 2 looked to just continue in its footsteps, to not fix what wasn't broken. But through that, was the passion that the original had brought over into the sequel? Did they manage to capture the lightning in a bottle a second time? Many would say yes, with the game both receiving positive sales and reception upon release. But looking back at it now, for me, a lot of Fallout 2 feels hollow, like it's missing something that the first game brought to the table. What is it that's missing exactly? Well, that's what we'll look into today. Whether or not this huge shift in size and tone for the series manages to live up to the original, or to be as special as what we received previously. If you enjoy these videos, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing. The sequel to one of the most important entries in video game history, let's take a look into what some consider the last true Fallout game, and one of the greatest and most disappointing games of its time. I'm Super Rad, and this is the big Fallout 2 retrospective, and a big potential spoiler warning for the entirety of the series. Starting development before Fallout 1 had even shipped, Fallout 2 wasn't just part of the typical structure within Interplay Productions at the time. Rather, Fergus Urquhart, one of the producers and designers for the game, created a division within the company in 1996 known as Dragonplay that would focus on RPGs. Fergus named the division Black Isle Studios 2 years later after his homeland, but had originally been saving the name for his own studio. Unable to come up with anything better, he eventually used this idea for the name of the division at Interplay. This division would have many of the individuals who worked on Fallout 1 within it, so while Fallout 1 was developed more purely by Interplay, Fallout 2 would be produced by the company and developed by this division that Fergus headed. While best known for Fallout and Baldur's Gate as well as some adjacent games, Black Isle would work on several other projects. They even helped produce a game called Lionheart: Legacy of the Crusader that used the special system prevalent within Fallout at the time. It even had perks, tag skills, etc. It was the same thing. Fallout 2 was announced by Tim Kaine in December of 1997, and he was forced to make the pitch for the game by Brian Fargo, the founder of Interplay. Brian didn't like the initial design of the sequel because he didn't see Tim's hand in it and wanted him to contribute more to it to keep the magic of the original. Most of the original heads, like Tim and Leonard, didn't want to work on a sequel to Fallout 2, especially since the game was set to have a rushed development so it could come out a year after the original while being even bigger. Fergus mentions this deadline was due to financial difficulties within the company. Exhausted from the amount of crunch required from Fallout 1, seeing the writing on the wall for Fallout 2 left a severe lack of motivation to work on the project for him, but Tim was assigned to it regardless, and he would work on it for a bit at least. However, crunch was only one of the problems they faced during development. With the success of Fallout 1, more eyes were put on the series internally, and through that, more restrictions were placed on development. a far cry from how development went for the original game, and something Tim has lamented about. Despite not wanting to work on the project, Tim, Leonard, and Jason Anderson would lay the groundwork for the locations and story arc. They'd also figure out how to redesign the followers/companions so that they could grow alongside the player character. Leonard even made an ad for the Gecko that would be placed near the end of the Fallout 1 manual or survival guide as an indicator to what the sequel was about. This was mostly because the page was blank previously and the group didn't want to leave it as such. So this was a fun way to hint at what was to come without giving anything away. Tim would have multiple meetings with Brian Fargo alongside Leonard and Jason where they would express their unhappiness with the project. Despite this unhappiness, they managed to stick around for 3 to 4 months. During this time, Tim would ask Fergus to make Fred Hatch an associate producer on the project, as he had been heading the development of the sequel at the start. But this promotion never actually happened because Fargo wanted Tim to head the project like he did for the original, essentially asking him to take over. Physically and mentally exhausted from the crunch of Fallout 1 and seeing the crunch ahead with the October deadline, Tim wasn't sure if he had it in him to make that happen. Add onto this the extra eyes on the project and people taking credit for the game despite having done no work on it, and Tim's unhappiness and animosity towards the company as a whole seemed to grow. Marketing even started making additions and changes to things like the box cover despite Tim having never met these people before. Feeling like the power was out of his hands, the game began to feel less and less like the passion project of the original. Every day, more controls slipped from his grasp in order to make the game more marketable in a hope it would sell well. The notorious Temple of Trials at the beginning of the game is the perfect example of this, as they were mandated to include it even though Tim didn't want it at all. They didn't even allow it to be skipped on repeat playthroughs, despite that section potentially being the worst part of the game, at the very least acting as a giant wall that stops new players getting into it, which once again was completely the opposite of what it was supposed to be there for. In fact, listening to fan feedback may have been one of the biggest issues within development, wanting to add the tutorial for better onboarding and wanting to make the game bigger in a short period of time were only detrimental to the development time and structure, something that was explicitly noted by those on the team, mind you. That's not just me speculating. The real final straw for Tim, which he brought up in a video 3 years ago on his personal channel, was how his bonus was affected due to a bug in the original game. During development of Fallout 1, a game-breaking memory bug was found that took a large amount of extra hours to find, despite it being a very simple mistake that was easy to fix once pinpointed. It was a for loop that had a less than equals sign instead of a strictly less than sign, and little things like that can lead to big issues that you aren't initially aware of. Brian Fargo demanded to know who was at fault once the bug was found, and Tim refused to sell anyone out. Later on, Tim was handed an amount of funds for bonuses that he was asked to divide among the team, something he tried to do based on what individuals had contributed to the project, looking to be as objective as possible. However, when those bonuses finally came around, Tim noticed that they weren't accurate to what he signed off on with Fergus. Specifically, Tim's bonus check was smaller than anticipated, incredibly so, despite expecting to have one of the biggest based on how he formed his spreadsheet. Turns out Fargo went over Tim's head due to the delay of the game from the memory bug. Since Tim wasn't willing to sell out the other developers, Brian decided to punish Tim instead through his bonus. This series of events that Brian explained as a way to encourage Tim to do better next time was enough for Tim to finally draft up a resignation. Tim handed the resignation to Fergus 2 weeks later and agreed to stay until the end of the month. In solidarity and also unhappy with the development, Leonard and Jason resigned as well, using the same resignation letter as Tim. They left at the end of January or beginning of February in 1998. It wasn't just this, of course, but it definitely broke the camel's back. Other issues included how the studio continued to grow and changed from a team of developers who loved games to individuals who probably hadn't played a single game in their lives. There were over 600 people at the studio when Tim left, after all. Now, if you'll allow me a quick anecdote, when I was in college for game design, before I went to get my bachelor's in comp sci, I had a teacher or professor whose philosophy was that you had to give up playing games in order to make it as a game designer. That kind of framework just always felt so sad and bleak to me. The idea that you had to give up your passion to make things you're passionate about always sounded so backwards. And in the end, this was one of the contributing factors that led to this rift within Interplay. It just doesn't work. It's a philosophy that has evidence of not working. Now, with the heads of the original game gone, that didn't mean the game was doomed necessarily. Far from it, actually. Things needed to press on despite this setback, and Fergus would take on the lead designer role in Tim's stead, taking the work they had started and trying to finish it. An example of this would be him taking over the work on the Vault City section of the game before handing it over to Chris Avallone, who was brought onto the project. Chris Avallone is a prolific and notorious developer within RPGs, having worked on games like Planescape Torment, Fallout 2, New Vegas, Knights of the Old Republic 2, and many more. Losing Tim, Leonard, and Jason, many individuals were pulled to work on Fallout 2, with Avallone in particular taking over as area designer for several locations like Vault City and New Reno, originally working on Descent to Undermountain, and then switching to work on Planescape Torment. Chris missed out on working on Fallout 1 during its development. This was something of a personal disappointment for Avallone, who was pleased to be given the opportunity for the sequel. Chris had to take bare-bones sections of the game and flesh them out. However, feeling the foundation as set by the three original leads, he noted that the nature of the game began to change with their departure. Despite the difficulties, Chris Avallone is known for creating some of the best locations in the game, and his work on Fallout 2 would just be one of his steps to more renown within the industry. New Reno, for example, is one of the best locations in the game, and it's not just me saying that, it is considered by many to be one of the better developed and fleshed out locations available. Despite the success on Fallout 2, Chris still has some misgivings. He wished he could have put more work into the Raider Caves and felt New Reno didn't match the aesthetic feel of the Fallout universe. He'd also regret the inclusion of the Talking Death Clause, which we'll get to. Many of these insights eventually found their way to the Fallout Bible, a well-known document that goes into developer insights within Fallout 2, as well as answering questions about the lore and the universe, mostly from Chris's research, perspective, personal ideas, and opinions. It's really just from his perspective, with some insights from others. And there's some flaws in that, like some huge flaws in that, to the point that I would barely reference the Bible anymore if I wasn't talking about the game he worked on, which is Fallout 2. It's no wonder that there were these aesthetic clashes he mentions, as Chris as well as others would just be handed models and artwork that were completed without any input due to managerial oversight. An example is the models for the guards outside the casino, who he felt didn't fit very well alongside the others in New Reno. Avallone called it a slapdash project without a lot of oversight, and you can really see that, I suppose. I think they were fine. I think they looked fine. I'm pretty sure I even bring it up later in the script. Sections of the games were broken off into parts to be handed to individuals to work on within a bubble. While these areas may have ended up connected in some ways, some more than others, this process would lead to severe tonal clash between areas and was a different methodology in comparison to Fallout 1, where everyone would be working on all parts of the game at all times. Additionally, without Tim there to push back on it, these groups were encouraged to fill these locations with whatever they could think of: quests, jokes, and more. The jokes are particularly the biggest tonal difference between the two games. While Fallout 1 was a dark game that used humor sparingly to give a glimpse of light within the wasteland, although I think that game is still very silly, Fallout 2 had a much heavier focus on, the jokes, the references, the pop culture. Tim's philosophy on pop culture references is the biggest indicator to this. Tim always said that if they were going to include a reference as a joke and the viewer didn't catch the reference, they shouldn't even realize they were watching a joke unfold in the first place. References needed to be used sparingly and in clever ways, so if you did get it, you'd be able to appreciate it, and if you didn't, you wouldn't even know it was there, thus keeping with the cohesion of the game world. In Fallout 2, these jokes ended up everywhere. They were encouraged even, along with the inclusion of Easter eggs as well. Monty Python skits, an entire faction dedicated to Scientology, and more. Individuals were encouraged to plaster in jokes and references wherever they could because the game needed to be bigger and better, and since Tim wasn't there to stop them, there was no one to rein the humor in. Fallout 2 is much more in your face with the humor and goes from a dark game that's still very silly to a more of a comedy with dark themes because of this. The game would be co-produced by Fergus and Eric DeMilt, with Fergus taking over as a lead designer alongside Matt Norton. As I mentioned earlier, marketing was much more involved this time around, even wanting to take the game from 256 to 16-bit color, something that would require reprocessing every piece of art for. Fergus didn't want this, and this was eventually walked back on by Brian. Similar issues with intervention from the UK branch would lead to them dictating that children couldn't be harmed in some releases. This is the same as Fallout 1 though, this already happened. Despite wanting the game bigger, many of the developers like Scott Evers saw this as a mistake, and this goal alongside the rushed development would lead to a lot more bugs than would be common. Areas like San Francisco even had to be rebuilt within a 2-week period, something that fell to developer John Daly to do, and we'll hear more about John Daly later. Scott was crucial to helping the Fallout 2 team work with the art assets, as no one really knew where the art was or how to utilize it. However, he had a hard time doing so and preferred Fallout 1 over 2 due to it not being as compact nor taking itself as seriously, noting that the team went overboard with the pop culture references as I just mentioned. Eric DeMilt felt that Fallout 2 lost some of the heart of the original in terms of cohesiveness and storytelling, and brings up an anecdote where Tim stopped a Raccoon City reference from appearing in the first game. It would have been a city populated by raccoons. With how the game was so rushed, he felt as though there was no time to step back to reflect and see the effect of a buildup of all of these situations. In terms of overall design, mechanically, the game was more of the same. Similar to the original, the timer was removed to help promote better exploration. Talking heads marked their return, and you would travel through an overworld map over days. Additionally, progression was once again designed to try and naturally guide the player from point to point. I personally think this gets a little messy due to how many areas there are and how they were worked on by different groups, but it does mostly work throughout. You generally know where you should go, but aren't forced to take that direction, lending to more player freedom, as was expected after the first game. However, the game felt way more combat-oriented, which could lead you to getting bored of it fairly quickly. Add on to this that many areas would be too strong for you if you went off the beaten path. It ended up feeling more linear than was intended. That's not necessarily a bad thing, you had the option to go wherever, but since combat was so prevalent, you in turn felt limited. Within these areas, due to them being segregated, choices were designed to affect the immediate vicinity rather than the map as a whole. The idea was that this would offer you a rich experience in the area you were in, even if you hit a wall and couldn't go somewhere else. If you were stuck for the moment, you still have plenty of choices and consequences to experience. And I think you can see how this philosophy managed to bleed into development for New Vegas as well. Wanting to focus on the character-driven nature of Fallout 1, the team wanted to develop an antagonist who was more present, leading to the creation of Frank Horrigan, a giant, near-indestructible member of the Enclave. Tim notes in a video that the Enclave from their original pitch and design changed heavily from what we got in the final product. Eric DeMilt lamented the design of Horrigan, seeing the Master from Fallout 1 as more iconic, and he's right, he's just so right. That is just true. In a press pack for Fallout 2, it is revealed that the game was originally meant to be 50 years after the original, but this would later be changed to 80. Additionally, this game would establish that the vaults were never just about saving humanity, but were also designed as social experiments, an idea Tim brought up early on. On release, the game was met with critical praise and reception, but fell off in sales and often lost to Baldur's Gate. Add on to this that the game needed to be patched due to bugs and customers had to be mailed floppy disks with the fixes back then. It was a messy release, and these patches were even known to break saves, which is inexcusable in my opinion. You think games are buggy messes now? They were just as bad back in the 90s, I assure you. In an interview/question section from Duck and Cover, Fergus mentions them releasing mini adventures using a module style, but that never seemed to come to fruition. Now, some online resources suggest that the game was released on September 30th, 1998, which is odd to me. There seems to be two sources for this reasoning, namely an article from Eurogamer that claimed that September 30th, 2018 was the 20th anniversary of the game, and some tweets from Chris Avallone on the same day celebrating this milestone. So the first source is just referencing the second source, and the second source seems to be wrong. This is a date listed on the Nukapedia page for the game as an example, and some YouTubers even seem to reference it as well. Can't really blame them too much for that. I'm pretty sure I messed up a release date once or twice in my videos too. So, it's whatever. I'm just pointing it out so you know when the game released. From what I can tell, this date may have previously been listed on various other sources like the main Wikipedia page before being corrected, but it would have came from these two other sources I already mentioned. And again, I don't necessarily fault people for making this mistake. After all, this was 20 years ago. and you have like an authority figure saying when it came out, and it's just wrong, so I can't blame them for thinking Chris Avellone was right there. And maybe I'm wrong and don't realize it, but all evidence points to the release date being on October 29th, 1998. Articles and databases state as such, for example, but Black Isle even hosted a celebration for Fallout 2 fans, and the announcement was for October 20th, 1998, while stating the game was to ship at the end of the month. So I really am confused where the first example of this September 30th date came from, and I'm guessing it was just the tweet from Chris Avellone. And I'd be curious if this was just a mistake on his part or if there's something I'm missing. Feel free to let me know if you know. I'm pretty sure it's just a mistake. In 1998, Interplay had to hold a public offering to fix some debt, changing to Interplay Entertainment Corp. On December 8th of 2002, they laid off the entirety of Black Isle Studio due to further financial difficulties. The studio would be later reborn in 2012, only to be shut down again in 2014. Joshua Sawyer, who worked at Black Isle on Icewind Dale and Van Buren, the planned sequel to Fallout 2, would leave the studio on November 11th of 2003, most likely due to the layoffs, although he doesn't state this for the record. Fergus would go on to found Obsidian Entertainment, and developers like Sawyer and Avellone would be there to create Fallout New Vegas, and a now untitled Fallout game. A brand new Fallout game is getting made. Like, since I've been writing this, there's been awful layoffs with Microsoft, and like, I hate Microsoft, don't get me wrong, but they did announce basically that Joshua Sawyer is heading a new Fallout game at Obsidian, which is crazy to me. I think Tim Cain may even be working on it. I don't know if that was made clear. So you have like two legendary Fallout developers potentially working on a Fallout game. Interplay would sell the rights of Fallout to Bethesda for a little over $1 million, allowing them to create 3 games. Difficulties would arise, leading to Bethesda's ownership of the IP that we know of today, but that's a story for another video. Maybe a video I already made, I don't know. Tim, Leonard, and Jason would go on to form Troika Games and create Arcanum of Steamworks and Magic Obscura, the Temple of Elemental Evil, and some people's favorite game ever, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. The studio shut down in 2005, but Tim and Leonard reunited at Obsidian Entertainment with Fergus, and Jason Anderson eventually moved on to In Exile Entertainment, both of which were acquired by Microsoft. Tim and Leonard would work on The Outer Worlds, and Jason is currently working on the new Clockwork Revolution that has yet to be released. During his time at Obsidian, Tim briefly retired. After working contract jobs for the studio, he eventually went back to full-time, but continues to make YouTube videos exploring aspects of game development and his history with games on his channel. Despite the development struggles and a loss of direction from individuals who created the series, like Tim and Leonard, Fallout 2 still managed to release and continue the franchise in a way that pleased fans and left them expecting more. There's a lot of chat logs and interviews with fans showing how much they appreciated this entry despite the design changes that came with the departure of some of the heads. While it was rocky, it's clear that Fallout 2 still managed to become a beloved entry in the series for many. And despite its age, we still get more and more insight into the development as the years go on. Tim Cain has his channel, Chris Avellone created the Fallout Bible, and people still continue to talk about and ask questions revolving around Fallout 2. The change in tone throughout the game, the pop culture references that are constantly in your face, the overwhelming humor, and more show that there were big differences between Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. That's why I'm always surprised to hear people say Fallout 3 and Bethesda as a whole do not understand Fallout. Tim Cain is even on record praising the newer entries for revitalizing the series and has played it multiple times. He has his criticisms, of course, but Fallout 3 may be closer to the original experience than you may realize based on how people discuss it online. But now it's time to move on. Let's finally take a look at what the game has become and make our way through the wasteland once more. We're back in the world of Fallout once more. This time we have an opening scene featuring A Kiss to Build a Dream On by Louis Armstrong. Within we see a bigger focus on the vaults, with an instructional video being played for an unknown audience. Specifically, Vault Tech is explaining the process for leaving the vaults after the bombs have fallen. Vault dwellers are expected to leave with the Garden of Eden Creation Kit, or GECK, to begin life anew, hinting at what we will be searching for within this entry. Again, the GECK was hinted at within the manual for Fallout 1, since development for 2 games overlapped slightly, allowing the storylines to feel more cohesive initially. What is the Gect and what does it do exactly? We'll never know within Fallout 2, but the power of it is very real, and we'll see examples of that later. Following this presentation, some faceless vault dwellers open their vault for the first time only to be met by members of the Enclave, sporting their advanced power armor. While the vault dwellers wave at their new compatriots, they are quickly gunned down by miniguns, setting the stage for the main antagonists of Fallout 2. Once again, we are met with the iconic line, war. War never changes. However, instead of focusing on historical figures, their political motives and the like, we see a more recent idea of how the end of the world happened. Too many people requiring too many resources as oil began to dwindle led to a catastrophic war that nearly wiped out humanity as a whole. However, thanks to the vaults, survivors emerged to reclaim the wasteland. While there is mention of what caused the war, there is much less focus on humanity as a whole within this initial speech. Rather, knowing how the vaults saved humanity and opened again, we get a sort of recap surrounding the Vault Dweller we played as from the first game. Having defeated the Master and his mutant army, the Vault Dweller was exiled from Vault 13. This led to a bittersweet ending in the original, and while seen as fairly sad, I always like to look at it as more hopeful than presented. The allies the Vault Dweller made, and the companions they could have along the way. Our player character was never truly alone. While they lost their initial family, they found a new one, and this is exactly where Fallout 2 leads us. After the exile, the Vault Dweller went to explore the wasteland further and founded a village in the Great Canyons known as Arroyo. Taking place 80 years after the events of Fallout 1, the Vault Dweller is long gone, but their village lives on as tribals. I always found that odd considering how much the Dweller knew of the wasteland and the vaults. You'd imagine he'd found a settlement similar to Shady Sands, now the NCR, but no. Instead, it's a small tribal village with shamans and traditions that don't really fit with what the Vault Dweller had experienced in my mind. Maybe it was due to the isolationist aspect of the village. Not many people come and go from Arroyo. Then again, they do trade. It seems odd that they would have started with the knowledge the Vault Dweller had while having access to the rest of the wasteland to end up like this. Devolved doesn't feel like the right word. They aren't lesser than other societies, but they should have had more available to them than they do, more technology and knowledge passed down. In the Fallout Bible, Chris Avellone tries to shed some light on this, namely that 80 years is not a short time and that the Vault Dweller didn't bring enough knowledge-based resources to teach future generations. As a farming settlement with no technology or guns to practice on/with over the years, there wasn't much to do or learn other than farming as a whole, and while the Vault Dweller may have brought some along from Vault 13, many others came from the wastes and their own tribal culture would have had a greater influence on the community as a whole over a single individual. I don't buy that, but it's fine. Chris further explains that the decision to make the Arroyo culture tribals was most likely a game logic/thematic one. It was something they wanted to play around with, so the logic of the settlement was modeled to fit that plot, rather than necessarily developed as you may have expected based on the ending in Fallout 1. Avellone continues to mention instances of European settlers going native, as he puts it. He says a lot of weird shit in the Bible, to offer further explanation for why this may have happened to Arroyo. He also suggests the village elder is the daughter of the Dweller, and thus your mother as you play a descendant of them. Living in peace since its founding, it is mentioned that the Earth has not forgotten the war, suggesting there may be some difficulties arising within the tribe. The opening has a large focus on how humanity led to its own destruction, a very human thing to have happened, and despite almost being wiped out, war continues to rear its ugly head. First with the Master and now with the Enclave. Despite this, people continue attempts at rebuilding society, and I feel people generally tend to overlook this part of the message. Despite humanity's destructive tendencies, they also have the tendency to hope and grow, to rebuild even after almost being wiped out entirely. While Fallout has dark themes and messaging, it also wants you to experience this hope. So what do we need to do in Fallout 2 this time around? Well, we're about to find out, but before we do, we need to create our character. While this is mostly the same as the last game, there are some differences to discuss, and it'll be good to retread some of the information surrounding character stats so that you have a better idea of what is happening within the game as we discuss it. Like the previous game, you have pre-made characters to select at the start if you want. You don't want that, but if you do, they are there. Narg, Mingen, and Chitsa are unique in their own ways, but they are hardly optimized, and while optimization shouldn't be your main goal when developing a character in an RPG like this, neither should making a character that is already established and somewhat out of your control. That's why I always believe that a blank slate character is the best option for you to choose. Not only do you get to choose their backstory and history, to a degree, you get to entirely shape their starting stats to your preference. Characters generally need some sort of history even as a blank slate. The courier in New Vegas was a courier who got shot in the head. The Vault Dweller was a member of Vault 13. The Chosen One is a descendant of the Vault Dweller. These are necessary to drive the plot, but will still give you the space to form much of the character you want around these ideas. You're probably used to the special system if you are watching this video, but if not, special are the main attributes used to define the physical and mental capabilities of your character, as well as luck. It stands for strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck, respectively. Most of these attributes act the same as they did in the first game, with slight changes for some in the sequel. All attributes govern certain skills and will increase those skills as the attribute is raised, and many perks have special requirements. Strength affects your overall carry weight by 25 pounds per point, and also dictates your base hit points alongside endurance. While endurance adds bonus hit points per level, changing your strength would affect the base amount. Let's say my strength is 5 and my endurance is 6. My base hit points would be 15 plus my strength value and plus double my endurance values. So 15 plus 5 plus 12 for a total pool of 32. If I raised my strength later, say by 1, the initial pool would become 33. It's not a big difference, and your active pool of hit points is more affected by your endurance value when leveling up, as we'll go over shortly. Strength affects the base maximum value of a melee hit, with the max being your strength value subtract 5, and the minimum value always being 1. It is also used as a requirement for certain heavier weapons. Not meeting this requirement costs you accuracy, but I'd say it's fairly negligible depending on your skill with the weapon type. Strength also seems to affect your throwing range and accuracy. The associated skills for strength include melee weapons and unarmed. Perception mostly affects skills, but does have other uses, such as dictating the player's sequence, or their order to attack in combat. It also has an influence on your accuracy with ranged weapons, detecting traps, and random encounters on the world map. Its associated skills are Doctor, First Aid, Lockpick, and Traps. Endurance still remains a dumb stat in my mind within this entry. While your initial health pool is determined by your endurance and strength, the amount of extra HP you get per level is based on half your endurance plus 2. It's a minimal amount even in the long term, but raising your endurance later will increase your hit points retroactively based on your current level. These values hardly matter as you gain additional defensive values through your armor, and its ability to affect resistances is also worthless as you will rarely find yourself dealing with poison and radiation in the game. Well, poison could be a bit of an issue early on, but I basically never saw it after the initial areas. Associated skills include Outdoorsman. Charisma was initially a dump stat in the original game, but has been reworked slightly. With the large amount of companions you can find in Fallout 2, it now dictates a limit to the amount of individuals that can be in your party at a given time. Specifically, it's half your charisma rounded down. As I said in the previous video, it does affect part of the calculation when determining an NPC's reaction towards you. Characters have initial reactions to the player based on several factors, and having a poor initial reaction can sometimes lock you out of interacting with them. And while you may think it affects speech checks and persuasion, this isn't the case. Rather, it affects the speech and barter skills, which can be leveled with or without a decent charisma value. And so the associated skills include barter and speech. Go figure. Intelligence is more important than charisma is to speech, as it dictates if you will have certain options in dialogue to roll speech against. This makes it one of the most important stats in the game, alongside it affecting how many skill points you get per level up. The most novel aspect of intelligence is that characters with a stat lower than 4 become stupid characters with unique dialogue options, and this will heavily affect how you interact with individuals in the game. I recommend not trying this with a new character if you are just starting Fallout 2 for the first time though. Associated skills include Doctor, First Aid, Outdoorsman, Repair, and Science. Agility is another stat that is majorly important as it determines how many action points you have when it's your turn in combat. Every action requires action points. Moving from one space to another costs 1 point, and each hex after that requires another. Most weapons require 4 to 6 points to use depending on several factors. The amount of action points you have available initially is 5 plus half your agility rounded down. This means it requires 2 points in agility to raise your action points. Both 4 agility and 5 agility will give you 7 action points, but 6 agility will give you 8. For that reason, having an odd value for agility could generally be seen as worthless, unless you plan to raise it in some way through the game mechanics later on. Some perks also affect this. Agility also influences your base armor class, which we'll get into later. Associated skills include big guns, energy weapons, lockpick, melee weapons, small guns, sneak, steal, throwing, and unarmed. It's a big one. For the final stat, luck, I'm going to repeat what I said in the Fallout 1 video. It was mainly used for critical hit rate and unique encounters. While resources online claim it affects invisible dice rolls behind the scenes, I couldn't figure out what that actually means. What we do know is that those unique encounters require high luck to run into consistently. This seems to have changed in Fallout 2 due to the large amount of encounters added and is dictated by several new factors I'll go into later. Its only associated skill is gambling. When creating a character, you have 40 points to spend freely on your special. However, an individual stat can go no higher than 10 and no lower than 1, even with upgrades later on. A value of 5 is considered average and can be lowered below that, and the max value of 10 is called heroic. Special is iconic for a reason. While Fallout 1 was originally going to use the GURPS tabletop model for the game, which I have info on in my previous video, complications led to the creation of a new system entirely. And with this system, we got the ability to completely mold our character to how we want. The idea of a classless system where the character is entirely defined by their own skills and abilities was revolutionary within Fallout 1 and continues to influence games to this day. Traits return from the first game as well and allow you to add more specific details to your character. You can choose up to 2 traits or none at all, and each can affect the game in various ways, namely in providing some sort of bonus at the cost of something else. It looks to be a balancing act, giving your character little specialties and characteristics that make them unique. Gifted, for example, adds +1 to all special stats, while removing 10% of all skills and penalizing you further by offering 5 less skill points per level. Despite this, it still manages to be one of the de facto strongest traits in the game, as you will have plenty of levels to craft your skills as you see fit regardless. The bonus is just too huge, especially since raising special stats increases their associated skills anyway. In Fallout 1, you had the Night Person trait, which raised your intelligence and perception by 1 after 6 PM, but lowered them by 1 after 6 AM. This has been removed entirely from Fallout 2. Acting as an unrelated replacement, you now have the Sex Appeal trait option instead, which increases your appeal to characters of the opposite sex while lowering it with those of the same. Each trait is like this in some way, and I enjoy how it can define your character further than just their innate statistical abilities. However, the balance between them, with some being clearly better than others, could influence your decision, especially if you like min-maxing as I do. Finally, we have skills. In Fallout 2, skills mostly stay the same and can be broken down into 3 categories: combat, active abilities, and passive abilities. Combat abilities include things like weapon skills, unarmed, and throwing, and are used to determine accuracy with a weapon in combat. Active skills like First Aid, Doctor, Repair, Lockpicking, Science, etc. are listed in your skill decks and can be used actively within the game environment to interact with objects or your character. Passive skills include Speech, Barter, Gambling, and Outdoorsman, and are used in the background to influence things like speech checks, your luck at casinos, shop prices, and random encounters. Many skills were useless in Fallout 1, and many still tend to be in Fallout 2. However, the game has a stronger focus on checking skills to see if you gain access to certain features, such as needing a high doctor skill to understand certain information found on a medical computer in Vault City. Does that make it worth increasing them as you play? Well, sometimes. It depends what you want. By far, Speech, Science, Repair, and Lockpicking are the most useful on your journey because they consistently allow you to do things that the game checks for. But are you ever going to use the first aid skill when you'll be swimming in stim packs? Probably not. Almost certainly not. So I appreciate the attempt to make some of these skills more useful behind the scenes, but there are still crucial skills that stand above the rest. This means outside of role-playing purposes, which is valid, there are almost always options that you should pick regardless of your character, otherwise it feels like a waste. I like the role-playing aspect of some of these skills, but they need to feel impactful and worthwhile. Unfortunately, many of them fall flat here. Outdoorsman has seen a complete rework here, as it is now used to help bypass random encounters. Since many of the encounters are hostile, it's nice to be able to choose whether or not you actually engage with them. Unfortunately, even as a quality of life skill, Outdoorsman falls flat, as the Highwayman, which you get later, functions similarly and for free. Not financially free, mind you, but free in terms of skills. In Fallout 1, a skill point would raise a skill by 1%. You could get these values all the way up to 200% if you wanted, but this was never necessary by any means. The idea behind this is that some skills are checked against values, so a skill of 100% could be lowered based on something else. By raising it past 100%, you are helping to guarantee certain outcomes. In Fallout 2, skills can be raised up to 300%, although I doubt you will ever see this in a normal playthrough. Except when you beat the game, there's a way to do it there. It's for the same reasons as the previous game, to better assure results, but some checks within the world now expect you to be above 100% to get the most successful outcome, such as a quest in the Sierra Army Depot near New Reno. However, in order to help limit you in forced specialization, rather than an all-rounded character, certain breakpoints begin to require more skill points per level. From 1 to 100%, you require 1 skill point. The cost for 101 to 200% goes up by a skill point per 25%, and anything above 200% requires 6 skill points total, making it ludicrous to try and hit 300. So a skill from 101 to 102 costs 2 points, while a skill from 126 to 127 costs 3, as a further example. I really like this concept because it makes specializing for specific rewards require just that, specializing. You can still max out a lot of skills to 100% before the end of the game, but managing to push some of those skills further has various rewards at the cost of leaving other skills lacking. However, since many skills are useless, this doesn't hurt as much as it should. Players can tag 3 skills to give them an initial bonus at the start of the game. Additionally, tagged skills get raised by 2% at a time per skill point instead of 1, making it easier to push them to their limits. Just another means of encouraging you to focus and make your character unique. Lastly, you can set your name, age, and gender within the character creator, although these hardly matter. There are a few extra situations where gender plays a factor in Fallout 2, but hardly anything that is noticeable or really worthwhile. Age doesn't matter at all. Despite aspects of the character creator feeling less useful to the point of not being considered at all, it's clear that the core of the system is fluid and impactful enough to be beloved by fans and used throughout Fallout as a series, with other games adopting similar models as well. It's iconic for a reason, and that reason is that your character can feel so easily unique to you, rather than you making changes to an already established archetype. And while aspects have been changed to better bottleneck you into choosing real specializations, it's unfortunate there is still so much leeway due to the uselessness of various character mechanics. Once your character is created, you'll be met with a FMV scene featuring the village elder. We quickly learn that the village of Arroyo is in danger of being destroyed due to sickness spreading through the children and animals and a lack of growth from their crops. The elder further explains that old hollow discs talk of the Gecko, or the Garden of Eden creation kit, which she believes could be used to save your people. As a descendant of the Vault Dweller from the first game, you are referred to as the Chosen One, and that will be the title used to refer to the Fallout 2 player character both in this video and throughout discussions online. However, before we can start our quest to find the Gecko, we need to prove our worth by completing the Temple of Trials, the new tutorial segment added to this entry that is long, unskippable, and borderline unfair in my opinion. It's doable no matter what, but you may be unwillingly going into a very difficult segment of the game right away depending on how you built your character. This is the section of the game that Tim didn't want at all, and would have at least liked it to be potentially skippable. Unfortunately, this was shot down, and so we are stuck with it. Of course, I'd go through it in this video regardless, but no, I do so begrudgingly. Before you is the Temple of Trials. What the temple is or how the villagers created it is unknown. Chris Avallone states in the Fallout Bible that the temple was built on the ruins of an old pre-war building, most likely a church. I don't know many churches that look like that on the inside, but it's whatever. I think it's better to just assume they built it themselves somehow than there being a random church in the canyons of California. Apparently all the decorations were done by the villagers anyway, who's to say they didn't do the rest? So why is the Temple of Trials so brutally maligned? I'd say the biggest issue is that it removes the initial freedom of exploration from the character for a period of time before they can get anything done. Freedom that is expected after Fallout 1. In the original game, you were just in a cave. You had rats to kill if you wanted, but you just had to walk out. Additionally, you had a gun on you, so if you were specialized in ranged weaponry, as pretty much anyone playing Fallout will be, you'd have something to make you at least somewhat useful. Unfortunately, as a tribal village wielding at best spears, there are no guns for us to make use of within the temple. Meaning if you didn't specialize somewhat in hand-to-hand combat or the use of melee weapons, you'll be missing the majority of your attacks while taking significant damage. This then encourages you to kite enemies throughout the temple or try to bypass them all by running through. So what happens is, they give you this long tutorial segment, but make it extremely difficult for you to complete unless you were built in a very specific way. You don't necessarily know much about your village when making your character. You don't necessarily know guns won't be accessible. So you can inadvertently make the game harder on yourself almost immediately at no fault of your own. In terms of content, the temple is pretty bare bones, but it does at least try to teach you some things. Combat is going to be a real slog and potentially overwhelming if you didn't build your character for that very specific type of combat they expect you to engage in. You'll also come across a locked door that is there to teach you how to use active skills. Just select the skill and the door, and then try to open it over and over again until it works. You'll be doing this a lot throughout the game. Additionally, you will begin to spot traps with decent perception and can disarm them using the trap skill, but I never bothered with this as most can be bypassed or just healed through. A little more difficult to get around with companions, however, as are most things in Fallout 1 and 2. It's better, and we'll see that shortly, but still awfully annoying. The most useful thing to learn here is how to get through certain doors you simply cannot unlock. Fallout 2 can be fairly freeform in some aspects and limited in others, but being able to blast your way through things you can't open immediately shows up more than once and is a welcome option. For that reason, they offer explosives in a container nearby that will allow you to blow open a nearby passageway. This concept may seem a little confusing at first. Generally what you will do is open your inventory and choose to use the item. You can cycle through selection types and then scroll to select further options while in interact mode. By selecting the use interaction on the explosives, you open up a timer window and this will count down in real time once you set it and exit the menu/inventory. Be careful as failing to drop the item and get away in time will cause it to explode near you or potentially even on you. A mistake and learning experience I'm sure many make here. I always set my timer and then drop the explosives wherever I want them to blow up near and then I run away. 10 seconds is almost always enough time. Fallout 2 can be really malleable and interactive during these segments. You can interact with an object or try to use an item on it by scrolling to the use item option in the interact mode of your mouse. You'll be cycling through these modes a lot. It's the main way to play the game and feels a bit clunky at first, but you get the hang of it over repeated use. Want to move? Make sure you right click so that you are in move mode. Want to target someone and attack them? Switch that mode again. Once you make it through the gauntlet of the worst fights you will ever experience in the game, we finally get to explore the concept of having options when interacting with NPCs. Your final trial is to beat Cameron in combat, but you don't have to. You could use speech options to try and convince him to let you pass, or you can pickpocket the key from him. So there are 3 potential options, all based around their own archetypes. You should be careful though. I wanted to check something before confirming how I would handle the situation and left the conversation with Cameron briefly. When I tried to talk to him again, I didn't even have the option for the speech check anymore. What this really means is to save often and aggressively. There are going to be so many situations within this game where leaving dialogue or just saying the wrong thing will completely lock you out of a preferred path or even some content. That's good for the role-playing experience to an extent, but you'd expect mechanically to be able to prepare a bit more for certain things by exiting dialogue and returning. If I had the ability to talk to Cameron here, I should have the ability to continue convincing him unless I already failed. Instead, I got locked out of this option and never realized that was even possible until this specific playthrough. Regardless of how you decide to get by Cameron, you will proceed into a shrine where the original vault suit of the Vault Dweller is kept. You can see that the people revere the Vault Dweller zealously. His influence carries great weight in Arroyo. Now it is your turn to take up the mantle and save the village that the Vault Dweller has built. After a short scene, you'll be taken straight to Arroyo proper and earn your first level up. Fallout 1 had a level cap of 21, but due to the amount of experience needed per level increasing by 1,000 each time, this could be difficult by itself to achieve. To hit level 2 requires 1,000 experience, then level 3 requires 2,000 experience, then 3,000, 4,000, etc. That's not just another 1,000 to level, it's the previous level's requirement plus 1,000. So level 21 requires a total of 20,000 additional experience after you hit level 20. While these calculations haven't changed, the level cap has been technically removed. In reality, it goes up to 99, but the concept of reaching that level naturally through intended normal methods is basically impossible within your playthrough. I only hit level 26 in my latest playthrough, and 30 is where people consider it to start getting really absurd. Whenever you level up, the main thing that'll change is your health pool, as well as acquiring an allotment of skill points to spend as you see fit. And these can be stored for later use. What can't be stored are perk points, and these can be lost if not allocated during every third level up, although this value can be increased to 4 levels with a specific trait. Quite the oversight once again in my opinion, especially since this is the second game where this happens in a row. Maybe oversight isn't the right word, as it seems to be intended, but it isn't communicated well or at all. See, the loss of a perk point doesn't happen right away. To their credit, they do ask you to select a perk every time you open the character sheet when you have one available. What isn't communicated well is that if you manage to gain 3 levels without selecting a perk, that previous perk point is now forfeit. Why they decided to go this route instead of saving them like skill points, I'll never know. Maybe it was just too powerful and power gamey. But perks aren't that spectacular in the classic games, at least how I see them. So if you learn that you can save skill points, you may think the same of perk points and never know any better, losing functionality for your characters in the long run. I think the best fix for this would be to force the player to choose a perk, or at least select an option that makes it clear they are choosing to give it up. Regardless of that weird decision, the leveling and character building system in Fallout is universally praised. Perks specifically, which were added as a sort of afterthought based on an idea by Brian Fargo, have become a staple in countless gaming experiences. Perks are a standard for many games, and that is thanks to Fallout and Fallout 2 specifically. Add on to that the freeform nature of character creation and progression, and you can form a character to be what you need it to be in the moment, regardless of what you have been doing in the game. Want to be better at science? You don't need to go use a bunch of computers until that skill goes up, you just need to allot the points. There's some appeal to skill-based progression systems where you tend to use the skill to make it better. Games like Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim are some key examples here, but this more freeform take on the idea is very welcome and is really just another flavor of RPG mechanics. So combat probably sucked a little for you at the start there, huh? Or maybe it didn't, but you may be wondering exactly how it works, so let's delve into that now. I'm going to go over a lot of what I did in the first Fallout video, so if you want to skip all this, too bad. That video came out months ago and you need a refresher. But if this is in a collection video now, again, too bad. Just kidding, there should be timestamps in the description. Maybe. Combat always starts the same. Someone initiates, there's a response, and then we enter the sequence phase. Who initiates the fight is important alongside sequence because it can help you get an edge over your enemies. Sequence is initiative, or what determines who goes first. Its value is dictated by your perception multiplied by 2, but can be affected within the game. Whoever has the highest sequence goes first, and then you work your way down the list of those who are actively in combat. If you have a particularly high sequence, you could attack someone, allow them to defend, and then immediately begin attacking again, allowing you to quickly earn an edge in battle. However, the opposite is also true. With a low sequence, you could see yourself dying before you even get your main turn. Sure, you get a defensive round, but if 6 dudes get to attack you after that, before you even get to really attack one, that's not a very good situation to be in. Players have a certain pool of AP based on their agility and perks. This value is refreshed every turn and is used both for movement and for attacking. Weapons generally have the ability to attack normally for 4 to 5 AP, but they may have a burst option that costs 1 extra. And all weapons/attacks have aimed shots that cost 1 extra as well. If it costs you 4 AP for a normal attack, it costs you 5 for an aimed shot. Additionally, reloading costs 2 AP. Aimed shots are what people think VATS is in Fallout 3. While comparable, they are actually different systems, and VATS was technically created in Fallout 3 onward, with aimed shots being their own unique mechanic in the classic games. People often confuse these, and I understand why. They are essentially the same with different titles, but the fact remains. When performing an aimed shot, players will be given a scan of the target's model, as well as various spots they can choose to hit. Since normal shots just aim at the torso, this will have the same accuracy in an aimed shot as it does in a regular one, with more precise parts of the body lower in accuracy instead. The benefit is that aimed shots come with potential additional effects such as crippling limbs, increased critical hit damage, or blinding the enemy if you hit them in the eyes. It's a risk versus reward tactic, because not only are you paying more for it, but you're also taking an accuracy penalty. Some builds may focus solely on aimed shots to make them as accurate and effective as possible, while some others may try to shoot normally as much as possible. It's really up to what the player wants and isn't required in the slightest. Your hit chance is based on several factors. It's a long equation I don't feel is worth going into. But there are some clear factors that we can focus on. For one, your skill with a weapon will be a big factor in determining your initial shown percentage. Generally, the higher the skill in that particular weapon, the better the chance to hit, and ranged weapons gain more effective range as you increase their associated skill. However, this percentage can only ever hit a maximum of 95%. This value is a bit misleading. Once you know your hit chance, it is then compared to the target's AC or armor class. If you have a 95% chance to hit, the target's armor class is then subtracted from that. Let's say that they have an armor class value of 30. That means we take the value of 95% and subtract 30 from it for a total of 65. Then the game will roll a random number from 1 to 100. If this number ends up being less than or equal to the value that we just calculated, it is declared as a hit and moves into the damage calculation phase. So we see we have 95% chance to hit, but against this specific enemy, that value is really 65%. If your chance to hit minus armor class ends up being 0 or lower, you'll never even have the chance to damage your target. If you hit the target, we then have to consider their damage threshold value. It's a means of determining how effective armor is if the target takes the attack. It's a hard subtraction, so whatever the damage would be, you remove the damage threshold from it. Now, if this damage reaches 0, it means the armor essentially shrugged it off, but if it manages to penetrate the armor anyway, say with a damage value of 20, we then need to go into the final phase of damage reduction. See these values here? On the left you have your damage threshold, and on the right you have your damage reduction. You can see that these values are broken down to damage types. So what is actually attacking you affects what those values will be. If you are still taking damage after the threshold, it will then be further reduced by the reduction percentage. So you took damage equaling to 35, and the threshold lowered it to 20, then your reduction value of 60% lowers that further to 8. However, this DR value is capped at 90%, so if you somehow get it higher than that, you're wasting resources. The point is that if something hits you and goes through your armor, you need to take some damage for that. That's a lot of calculations for something you don't really see or perceive within the game, and if I'm being honest, it's not something you will ever need to care about really, unless playing on the highest difficulty, maybe. Even then, eventually you just end up with power armor and keep upgrading to higher tiers of power armor within the endgame. So it's cool if you care about those aspects of the game, but you aren't forced to care about them in the end. Should you wear Mark II leather armor for the increased AC or metal armor for the higher threshold and reduction? It doesn't really matter, but it does enough that you may consider it for particularly difficult encounters on the highest difficulty. It never mattered for me in Fallout 1 or 2, it probably won't matter for you. Critical hits are rolled for after confirming an attack succeeded against its hit chance. They lead to increased damage, and this is where those aimed shot effects kick in. On top of all of this, some weapons have different ammo types which can affect their damage. Equipment can be upgraded through the game as well. This was in Fallout 1 but was minimal. Generally you could upgrade power armor to hardened power armor and a plasma rifle to a turbo version. Now certain characters can be paid to add modifications to several weapons in the game. You can upgrade a revolver to lower the reload cost to 1 AP for example, or give certain weapons additional range or magazine capacity. It's expensive at first, but there are ways around this, such as a character from New Reno that can do these for free. While not necessary, it really adds to your options. The game already has way more weaponry than before. Having the ability to further upgrade them, not customize them, allows you to keep using a weapon you like while providing additional benefits. And we would see this return in Fallout New Vegas. Fallout 4 would then take weapon upgrading and turn it into a full customization process that became a central mechanic to the game loop due to its intense focus on building, crafting, and upgrading, which I personally wasn't a fan of. I think Fallout is at its best when you have the simple option of what weapon you want to use and the ability to make those weapons better. Adding all of the customization and material costs from Fallout 4 really just detracts from the rest of the experience and looks to elongate your playtime. When you are ported to Arroyo, you'll be sporting your ancestors' old Vault 13 jumpsuit. You'll also inexplicably have a Pip Boy, which I assume is your ancestors as well. The Pip Boy functions the same as in the original, and yes, that is the Pip Boy right there near the top, not the Vault Boy, which confused some individuals and Leonard Boyarsky cleared up in an interview. Within this menu, you can check the status page to see a list of all visited locations, as well as any quests that have or still need to be completed. As a bonus, any holodisks you find can be used and will upload their data to the Pip Boy, allowing you to read whatever was on them. It's the main journal you'll have throughout the game, but it's more used to just list tasks that you have been made aware of, rather than providing further details and guidance akin to something like Morrowind, which has one of the best journal systems in any game ever created. While I generally try to complete every single quest and optional piece of content in the games I play, this feels incredibly disincentivized within Fallout 2. There are quests that can be failed through the wrong conversational options, and some that conflict with one another. Others are simply difficult to find, to complete, and can offer very little in terms of rewards or commentary. For example, helping one of the many families in New Reno too much will lock you out of boatloads of quests for the others. There are many ways around this, of course, but Fallout 2 is hardly a see everything and do everything type of game. Rather, it's about forging a unique path every time you pick it up again for another playthrough. Still though, we will see most of the quests completed within this run, though there won't be much to say about some of them. The clue button is still removed, as it was in the first game, a lost feature that was seen in an old demo for Fallout 1 but removed before release. It would provide various info to the player, like warning you to kill all gang members in a specific area, else they will seek vengeance in the future. I personally don't think most clues would have been necessary within the game, and apparently the developers didn't either, as it's never been implemented. Automaps is used to show you a local map of the areas you have explored. It seems to fill out based on how much you've explored the area, and has a fog of war covering spots you may have missed. You can check all areas you've been to previously regardless of where you are in the game world, but I never found this particularly useful, especially so considering you can pan the camera around whatever map you are in at the time. I suppose having it for reference is a nice touch, and is a functionality of the Pip Boy you may expect in universe. It just holds little value to the player. Archives let you rewatch any FMVs you've seen previously if that's something you're into. And finally, there's a clock and wait system that allows you to pass the time in the game world within an instant. The Pip Boy may not seem like it, but it's essentially as crucial to your playthrough as the modern Fallout games. Your inventory and character sheet, as well as the main game UI while walking around, are all designed to look as if they are aspects of the Pip Boy for you to use, and it becomes a welcome tool along your journey. Talking with the Elder, she explains that the Chosen One cannot be weak, hence the Temple of Trials. Additionally, a trader from Klamath, Vic, brought the people a Vault 13 water flask, making finding him our first goal so we can try to locate Vault 13. While the Vault Dweller came from 13, the knowledge of its location seems to have been lost with him, despite several other Dwellers apparently following in his footsteps. If you played the first game and think you can just run to Vault 13 right away, don't bother. Not only is the map slightly different, but you can't even enter the map for the vault until you find someone to determine its location in the game. It just won't show up otherwise. That's a bit disappointing since Fallout 1 was much more open-ended in that regard. If you wanted to, you could reach the Master or Mariposa right away. Luckily, you can skip the grand majority of the game if you want and get to San Francisco right away. You can get the tanker necessary for reaching the Enclave up and running completely just by reaching here, but it requires a stupid character when talking to the hubologists. It's a common, if not de facto speedrun strategy for the game. At least it was 8 years ago, I don't know about now. This is more so a fallback anyway. If you were playing the game regularly and expecting to reach the Enclave base by just running to San Francisco, you'd need to do more tasks and explore some other areas. You need a nav comp from Vault 13 and a fob from Navarro, so you would need to hit both of those locations, mostly complete them, and then head back and get the tanker fueled. In Fallout 1, you just need to make it to the 2 endgame locations, the Chapel and Mariposa. You could force your way through them in order to complete the game, regardless of if your character had some special stat or not. It'd be difficult, but it was an option from the get-go. Fallout 2 makes it crucial to hit specific locations in order to reach the singular endgame area and finish it. Except for the one scenario of having a stupid character. You could force your character to be stupid with drugs, but you'd never know this was possible initially. We'll be following the more intended path, where we collect breadcrumbs along our journey that slowly loop us around the wasteland until we reach the end. It's the intended experience and offers the most insight into the game. Arroyo is small despite its age, and there's not much to do here. Everyone knows one another, and you can talk to a good amount of the inhabitants, such as Fergus here, who wants the well fixed. There are at least 2 Fergus characters in the game, both named after Fergus Urquhart, who was one of the lead designers. You'd know that if you watched the development section, and you did, right? Fallout is full of lootable containers. Unfortunately, most of them are going to be empty, but you can generally find something half decent if you're persistent enough. Some of the best gear in the game is found in containers, after all. It's very easy to miss things in Fallout 1 and 2, usually unimportant things, but they can sometimes be crucial. To make matters worse, some characters aren't clearly interactable either. Many characters will either have a name or a generic title when examined. If you talk to named characters, they will almost always have an interactable dialogue string to engage with. Characters without names generally just have text appear above their head for flavor, and that's all. Yet, more than once, we will see some characters with generic names who are interactable characters we are asked to find. It's incredibly frustrating, and forces you to talk to literally everyone you come across to make sure you don't miss something crucial. Maybe not force you per se, but it trains you for sure. On top of the flask, you'll notice that we receive some money from the Elder as well. However, we're not rocking bottle caps anymore. Instead, this is the first time we see fiat currency in the series. Known as NCR dollars later on in New Vegas, this currency would start out as gold coins and later transition to paper as time went on. Despite only being one faction within the wasteland, the NCR are quickly becoming the most relevant and influential, and creating their own currency that is used throughout the entirety of the California wasteland is a sign of that. Within the village, we can meet several characters, but the most unique has to be Hakunin, the village's shaman. It's established early on that Hakunin has real, potentially supernatural powers. I don't mean it's up to interpretation either. This dude can straight up enter our dreams and send messages. That's something you'll notice about Fallout 2 in comparison to 1, a greater delve into the fantastical. You think Fallout 3 is weird for having paranormal events? Well, guess what, buddy? Fallout 2 did it first, and we could even say Fallout 1 did as well. In Fallout 1, the concept of psychers is established. The Master was the first to gain psychic abilities as he evolved from the FEV and his experiments, and he would later try to recreate that in other individuals. So while it seems directly connected to the FEV, the idea that people with psychic/supernatural abilities exist has been established since the very start, although Fallout 2 definitely leans into it a lot more. We'll see that again as we reach Klamath and the Den. Whether Hakunin is a psyker akin to the creations of the Master, or if psychic abilities are just able to develop naturally, or potentially through mutations due to radiation, doesn't seem clear. However, Hakunin won't be the only individual we meet that is like this. One of our companions, Sulik, is able to commune with the spirits of the deceased, and it's made very clear that this isn't just all in his head. That's right, we got magic, we got talking death claws, and we got ghosts, so buckle up. Hakunin will ask us to clear his garden of some mutated wildlife. As the village's healer, he needs to make healing powder, which is funny because he can make them for us as well, but we need to find them away from the garden in a different location within Arroyo. He thanks us for helping out and says he'll make us these healing solutions out of Brock flower and Xander root, which aren't around the immediate area. Weird, but still useful early on. These herbs will heal us similar to stim packs, but also come with some temporary stat debuffs, so keep that in mind. This is a good time to point out that you can be an absolute asshole to pretty much anyone. Many of the dialogue options are you being strictly empathetic and kind, sarcastic, or the most evil bully you can be. Really reminds me of something. The thing is though, unless you really just want to go through the process of role-playing a bad person, I generally advise against it. To their credit, Fallout 1 and 2 are games that include consequences. Kill a child and you're a child killer. Barely anyone is going to want to talk to you, and your options within areas would become heavily limited. But you can do it, that's the idea. Freedom but with consequence. Similarly, being an asshole to everyone you talk to is going to make them not want to talk to you anymore, and potentially even try killing you. For that reason, it's more incentive to play a kinder character if you want to see most of what there is to see and do most of what there is to do. But it's still up to you, and the game can still be completed regardless. While it pays to be polite, even acting kind all the time can lock you out of some content, as there are some dastardly individuals who want you to work for them. You can't join the Enclave, but you can do some bad deeds for some evil people, especially within New Reno, and I even encourage it as that makes up a huge chunk of the content in the game. There's a villager nearby who has lost his dog. We can offer to help find it, and this will have us walk into a new map within Arroyo full of geckos. You thought the Temple of Trials was annoying without a ranged weapon? Get ready to spend 20 minutes kiting geckos around until you can grab the dog. Or try to be creative, maybe you can sneak by them. Don't ask me, I slaughtered these little freaks for all the trouble they caused me in New Vegas. While these initial quests are fairly linear, that doesn't mean everything is like that. Far from it. We can receive an upgraded spear, which is awesome, I'll never use it, from another villager, if we can bring them some flint, and there's many ways to go about getting it, from convincing her, to paying for it with healing powder, or outright stealing it. There will be plenty of options in plenty of quests throughout the game, as this was the philosophy Tim Kaine had when working on Fallout 1. The idea is to be able to shoot, talk, or stealth your way through any given situation. While Tim admits to offering some leeway within Fallout 1 for this requirement, it's even more lax within Fallout 2, considering it's missing his guidance and watchful eye. Once you've done all there is to do in Arroyo, it's finally time to start the journey throughout the wasteland in search of the Gecko. To travel from location to location, you'll be using the world map seen here to do so. Broken up into grids, the Vault Dweller can travel through the majority of Northern California, and even overlap with the southern end slightly to revisit locations from the first game. By clicking anywhere on the map, your character will begin making their way towards the waypoint. If they stop and aren't in a specific point of interest, you can still enter a sort of random empty map based on where you are at the time, although I see little reason to do this, other than maybe using items along your travels. A lot of time will pass as you travel from location to location. It can take days to get to where you want to, and this remains true even when you get the car that was introduced to alleviate some of this. However, you don't need to worry too much anymore. Fallout 1 had an initial time limit of 150 days for the Dweller to find a water chip, and this limit could be extended through gameplay mechanics. Then there was a 500-day limit before the mutant invasion, but this was patched out shortly after release. However, time is still very much a factor within Fallout 1, and you can often feel pressured to get everything done in a timely fashion despite 150 days being more than enough for your typical playthrough. Fallout 2 does have some timed quests, but the idea of an overall time limit that ends the game has been removed entirely. While I enjoyed the sense of urgency that came with the stress of the time limit, I did understand some of its faults, such as potentially soft-locking a playthrough. Still, I felt it was integral to the game's overall design, and made you think a lot more about what needed to be done. Fallout 1 was a game about searching the wasteland and finding direction in order to do so. You needed to do that well to be successful, and it could feel stressful but rewarding. It was a core component of the game. Now that's gone in Fallout 2, and so you feel like you have a lot more freedom to go wherever and do whatever you want. However, without limits to some degree, I often find progression and exploration boring. There is no better feeling than playing a game where all you can do is walk around an initial area and then eventually have the world expand out for you because you are making do with what you have and then breaking those limits later for the reward of freedom. Similarly, it feels rewarding to successfully find the water chip within that time limit. Removing that removes a sense of identity from Fallout as a whole, but I wouldn't say it is the end of the world by any means. People still loved the game after all, and I even stopped thinking about it as time went on. It's just funny we get a car later on to save days, maybe months of travel time, but it doesn't really matter. Random encounters have changed slightly from Fallout 1. I'm having a hard time finding out what specifically decides if the game is going to even check for an encounter, but when it does, it looks at a set of scripts based on terrain type. Are you in a city tile, a desert tile, etc.? Once that is determined, Fallout 1 would then roll for one of 6 tiers of potential options within the table, with the weight of those options being influenced by your luck stat. Most of these encounters are combat specific, but some offer interactions with NPCs or items to find. Generally, Tier 6 encounters are better than Tier 1 encounters, and you can remove Tier 1 encounters entirely with a luck stat of 8 or higher. Similarly, it gets easier to have Tier 5 and 6 encounters as luck increases, although Tier 4 encounters will always have the highest chance of happening. Usually, but not always, dehydration encounters happen on Tiers 2 to 3, so they can end up being pretty rare to almost never showing up with high luck. This explains why I didn't see them much or at all in my previous video. Dehydration encounters check to see if you have a flask of water in your inventory. If you do, it gets used and you can be on your way. If not, it checks for the Outdoorsman skill. Since this is such a rare occurrence, the Outdoorsman skill ends up being fairly useless in Fallout 1. In Fallout 2, these encounters have changed slightly and have been moved to a single data file. Each tile on the map is assigned an encounter chance that is rolled for when the player character is on it. Additionally, where the tiles are centralized around, such as Arroyo or Klamath, have an effect on what table will be used to determine an encounter. Rather than having 6 tiers per tile type in Fallout 1, there are now upwards of 15 or more, and they have their own weighted chances of happening. Luck only affects the chance of running into special encounters that happen once per playthrough. It's a percentage chance that uses the value of your luck stat and adds 1 to 2% on top of that. These encounters generally have a level prerequisite to happen, and can only happen in desert tiles aside from the notorious Bridgekeeper encounter which I got this playthrough. Outdoorsman is now used to avoid encounters. I'm not sure if it's through a patch or in the original game, but the player will receive a message asking them if they want to take part in the encounter that they rolled to avoid. If they select no, they'll keep moving along their last dictated path. While this makes Outdoorsman more relevant overall, it's still pretty useless if you get the Highwayman, as this also does its own check after the Outdoorsman check to see if you can avoid the encounter. Overall, I think the rework to this skill helps but gets overshadowed by alternative methods of travel, namely the Highwayman. While working together, you'd have a better overall chance of avoiding an encounter, but the pure 50% chance you get with the car alone is so powerful that there really is no reason to put any points into Outdoorsman at all. But what of the encounters themselves? Fallout 2 wanted to be bigger and better than its predecessor. One of the ways the developers attempted to make that so was by filling the game to the brim with these encounters. It feels like you run into them more overall in my mind, but this may just be a placebo effect. However, since the grand majority of these are once again focused on combat, it can get exhausting running into them over and over during your travels. So this concept of avoiding encounters is sort of a band-aid fix to the problem. You created too much of something to the point it gets boring, and your fix is to be able to skip it. You'll hear someone say don't fix what isn't broken, but I do think encounters from the first game could have seen various improvements. I don't think making more and more of them is the answer. The variety of them is there, but the variety is generally confined into combat scenarios. Not always, but mostly. Lowering the rate of these encounters and making more of them environmental or conversation-based would have been an improvement for me overall. Generally though, people's real problem with encounters comes from the special ones you can run into, namely that many are references to pop culture that you may not understand. People use the man on the bridge as an example, but I really don't think it's that bad. Rather, I kinda see both sides with this one. The original goal was to tell a joke without someone realizing it was a joke or a reference unless they got the reference. That way they didn't feel left out and confused. The man on the bridge is a reference to a scene from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or the Quest for the Holy Grail. I have never watched Monty Python. And when I first saw this scene, I would have never guessed it was a reference to anything. Just some absurd scenario you run into. Does it fit within the world of Fallout? Sort of. It's a little more absurd than what you would be used to from Fallout 1, but I wouldn't say it's ludicrously so. There's worse references within the game that really leave you scratching your head, such as the Hobologists and their comparisons to Scientology, if you don't get what is being referenced in the first place. So it's absurd, yes, and many of the special encounters tend to be. There's a giant exploded whale in the middle of the desert, for example. But they are special encounters, one-offs, and meant to be as absurd as they are within Fallout 2. They aren't there to necessarily fit within the world and keep you immersed, and I don't personally hold value in the concept of immersion, so they never bothered me personally as much as they seem to others. While you can technically walk anywhere you want and find the grand majority of locations simply by running into them, talking to individuals and performing certain tasks will mark key locations on your map. Selecting these will have your character beeline towards them. Klamath is most likely the first settlement you will arrive in after leaving Arroyo. You don't have to arrive here, but the Elder suggests it and it's very close, and it'll be the only other location on your map, so, you might as well. While it's a fairly small settlement in comparison to what we will be running into later, there's still plenty to do here and a companion to gain. Similar to Fallout 1, Fallout 2 is broken up with two major acts, with the first acting as the search for the Gecko, rather than the water chip, and the second focusing more on stopping the big bad guy. I really enjoy the first acts of these games the most as they feel more freeform and allow us to explore and search for our goal while slowly opening up the world to us at an intended pace, but not forcing us to stay on the tracks. It's all about searching, detective work, and discovery. One of the first buildings is a hostel and shop where you can start buying and bartering, probably for the first time. In Fallout, everything is traded between characters and anyone will buy anything in your inventory. Usually this is a means of just collecting NCR dollars until you need them later, say for weapons, armor, and stimpaks, but early on you're going to be scrounging just to have even a little money to your name. Our first companion, Sulik, can be found here, a member of the Primitive Tribe, that's the actual name of it. Sulik is one of the very few companions that has a talking head. We can learn that Sulik is being kept against his will within this establishment, but he's not a slave, apparently. At least that's what the people who own him say. That's a trend in this game. While searching for his missing sister, who was taken by individuals wielding laser weaponry, Sulik ended up in Maida Buckner's hostel and drank himself silly before damaging the establishment around him. It was $500 worth of damages, but has been worked down into $350. We can talk to Sulik and learn that he has the ability to communicate with spirits. It's sort of up in the air at first whether or not he actually can, but you slowly learn that it's true. Or rather, there is evidence to suggest it's true throughout the game. Sulik can know things he shouldn't, and we can often ask him to commune with one specific spirit, Grampy Bones, to give us an idea of the current area we reside in. Sulik's sister, Kurisu, will never be found. We would have found her as a slave before it became cut content, and she would later be reworked into a character for the sequel to Fallout 2 that never came to be, Van Buren. There are multiple ways to free Sulik and get him to join us. You can pay off his debt yourself to Maida, you can give him the money to pay it off himself, or you can perform a quest that will make them owe you, allowing you to demand his freedom as compensation. We'll talk about that shortly. The point is that there will generally always be multiple ways of handling a situation. Sometimes just different means to the same goal or different resolutions entirely. The main reason we are here is to find Vic, and you can ask around about that, eventually stumbling upon his old shack that he lives out of. Here you can find an old radio that you need later, but it may seem like junk right now. Fallout 2 rewards you for searching thoroughly and hoarding here and there, but it doesn't expect you to. With there rarely being a time limit on anything, backtracking can be encouraged. If you found out later you needed the radio, you could just go back and get it, and nothing would really change or progress until you came back. This isn't always true. There's a quest with the dude missing a pancreas that I accidentally killed through neglect, but it is usually so. While asking around about Vic, you can get the den marked on your map. There's multiple people who can do this, so again, it pays to ask around. While doing so, you'll naturally meet individuals who have unrelated quests for you to complete. You'll really get the feeling of being an outsider here. People are aware that you are a tribal and will make that known constantly, generally looking down on you. This will be a prominent prejudice throughout the journey. However, there are ways to appeal to them and show that you're an actual person and not just some caveman they think you are. That's generally done through the game's karma and reputation system. Reputation is earned and lost based on your actions throughout the game, and is tied to individual settlements. As you do things for the villagers or earn special titles, people will tend to like you more, and may even offer things they wouldn't previously. Like, you can become a prize fighter in New Reno and everyone will know you because of that. The maximum functional reputation tier for a character is when you have over 30 positive reputation or under 30 negative. Karma is similar. By completing good deeds and earning karma, you can work your way up through various titles that will have your name traveling throughout the wasteland. Sometimes individuals will mention that they have heard of you when you offer to help them, and people will generally have an easier time trusting you. There is essentially no beneficial reason outside of role-playing to have negative karma, as it only acts as a consequence, often limiting who you can interact with and preventing you from keeping companions in your party. Generally speaking, while doing bad deeds may unlock some quests and conversations, it almost always pays to be a good character within the Wasteland. For example, there is a quest from an individual named Tor who wants his Brahmin protected against some scorpions. You can learn the Dunton brothers, two siblings who like to cause trouble in the town, have been dressing up like scorpions to bother Tor, but there's not much you can do with that knowledge. Instead, you can defend the Brahmin and see the Dunton brothers watching in the distance. Now, you're supposed to be able to talk to them and agree to turn on Tor instead, choosing to mess with his Brahmin for them. However, I couldn't get this dialogue to show up and wasn't able to progress through this quest line. If you do take the bad route, Tor will disappear. You can then be asked to track him down and rescue him. So going the bad route leads into another good quest in a way that has its own rewards. But you're not missing much by just choosing to help Tor at the start. Still, it's great that even the bad options may lead into unexpected journeys and quests, despite generally being more punishing on the player than anything else. Further into the settlement, you can find Trapper Town. Many of the inhabitants of Klamath work by trapping and skinning geckos. However, the northern part of town is closed off due to a rat problem. You need a key to enter the area to clear the rats, and you can get one from Slim, a local trapper, if you convince him. Or you can steal it, buy it, kill him for it, and even get it from a dog. If you're a female character, you could sleep with him for it, or you can just lockpick the entrance. Plenty of options for you if it's a task you want to complete. I personally got it from the dog by feeding it jerky, but I only knew you could do that anecdotally from online sources. I never would have thought of it otherwise. Things like that, where you may have a conversation with friends playing the game and learn something random and new, can really add to the overall experience and make your journey feel special. You can find rats and a rat god within the sewer or cave systems under Trapper Town. Killing the rat god gets you a small reward of experience and karma, but not much else. If you are diligent, you can eventually find a fuel cell regulator in a broken down car that can come in handy later. Back at Buckner's, you can talk to Arden to learn that her fiancé has gone missing and get the location of some toxic caves on your map. The area is full of acidic chemical waste that will damage you if you walk on it, but you can find rubber boots to help with this. As long as they are in your inventory, they will be considered active and prevent you from taking damage. However, there is a chance they will dissolve. If taking damage from the waste, there is a chance to gain a mutation where you grow an extra toe. This counts for companions too. They also need boots in their inventory or they will take damage. I believe power armor also counts, but we won't be seeing that for a while. Trying to make sure that your companions don't get themselves killed was fairly annoying in the first game, but there have been some improvements for Fallout 2 that I'll go over after we grab Sulik. It's a difficult area near the start of the game. I'd recommend having Sulik with you, but the thing is, you can get him for free by rescuing Smiley here, and you're probably broke at this point, so I usually push through. Klamath also has ranged weaponry, so you can actually play the character you intended if that's what you built during character creation. Further into the caves, you can find some sort of facility and Smiley. By clearing the way and reaching him, you can save him, but you can't access the facility without repairing the generator and having an electronic lockpick in your inventory. It's more a reward for returning later on within your journey and helps promote backtracking from time to time. If you rescue Smiley, you can use this as leverage to free Sulik, which I recommend. If you do get Sulik freed, Maida will try to act as if she's happy to have that damn tribal finally gone, and will tell you this between sobs. I guess she liked Sulik more than she let on, but I don't really care about the feelings of a person that kept an individual against their will. I get Sulik owed the money, but he does seem like the type of guy to eventually try and do the right thing later if given the opportunity. He is dealing with spirits and a lost sister after all, though I doubt they'd believe the former. At the very least, you can call Maida out for keeping him here and explain that Sulik will be better off away from her where he isn't forced into servitude. If you talk to Smiley after saving him, he can teach you how to skin geckos, meaning every gecko you kill from then on will have a pelt for you to loot and then sell for a small profit. This stops mattering quickly, but it can be nice early on, especially if you haven't done the Refueling the Still quest. Whiskey Bob wants you to go refuel his still, but it is surrounded by geckos. If you wait until rescuing Smiley to do this quest, you can make a decent amount of cash or just trade the pelts for other items. With most of the quests completed and being directed to the den in some way, we can grab Sulik if you want and begin making our way to the next major location for us to explore. But before that, let's talk about companions in general. As mentioned previously, Follow 2 allows you to have one companion for every 2 charisma, and there's a perk called Magnetic Personality that allows you 1 extra on top of that. Considering how charisma is somehow not as relevant to speech checks as you'd imagine, it's nice that it finally has some real use here. In the first game, there was only a few semi-permanent companions, and you could take them all the way to the end of the game. The thing is, companions can permanently die in both these games, and managing 4 people can end up being quite the hassle. Especially so when you can't move them out of your way, causing them to block doors and hallways constantly. Fallout 2 has many more companions to find, around 14. Having that many options is great, but having all of those individuals in your party would be too powerful, but also too annoying to deal with. So the charisma requirement really does feel like the perfect solution, and with a max charisma of 10, you can still have 5 party members if you want. I don't believe Magnetic Personality lets you go over this value, but I may be wrong. My favorite change, although not the only major one, is that you can now interact with and push NPCs out of the way. It's still awful, as it only moves them 1 space at a time per interaction, but you no longer have to worry about getting stuck and reloading a save file. Once static characters that you could hand equipment to and hope for the best, companions have been fleshed out significantly. For one, there is dedicated trade functionality that actually takes into account their carrying capacity, so you can't just use them as infinite storage mules anymore. However, the Highwayman can help alleviate a lot of your hoarding woes. More importantly, you can actually set up tactics for the party as well. You can suggest a distance for them to fight at like before, but now there's a whole interface where we can choose how we want them to act in battle, as well as make sure they have the best weaponry and armor equipped. By trading them weapons and ammo that they are proficient in, and then pressing the button on the tactics screen, the NPC will look through their inventory for what is deemed the most effective option. If they run out of ammo in a fight, they will then look for the next best, but this will allow you to make sure they are using exactly what you want them to be if you care about the specifics. Next we have dispositions. You can now select from some pre-made strategies for the companions to follow. Each companion has the same list of these dispositions, but some will be disabled based on their personality. Now there are some online resources that claim to explain what dispositions do, but I couldn't find anything official that went into real specifics. However, the manual does provide some brief descriptions. Berserk causes the companion to always be attacking and to never flee battle. They also seem to care little about friendly fire from what I can tell. Aggressive is basically the same, except they'll run away to heal after severe injuries. Defensive will cause them to run away even earlier, and Coward will have them run away from battles that they deem too dangerous. What that entails, I'm unsure, but as an example, Sulik cannot have this disposition selected. These are pretty opaque options and aren't super clear within the game itself what they do. I'd go further and say the instructions from the manual don't really tell you anything either. Luckily, there are ways we can form a more defined strategy for these characters by using the custom disposition option. Within this, you can break down combat into categories and define how your companions will act within them. You can select options for when they should consider using burst fire, when they should run away, what weapons you want them to prioritize, etc. This really helps you set them up exactly how you want them, although again, certain options are disabled based on the type of character you are interacting with. Still, I don't see a reason in using the more generalized dispositions outside of being lazy, because these characters are so volatile to your playthrough if you are not careful with them. One wrong decision and the next thing you know, Marcus is blowing you up with a rocket launcher while aiming at someone else because you told him to be aggressive. Not that aggressive, man. Companions are expensive in a way. For them to be the most effective, you need to supply them with weapons and ammunition as well as healing items. All of those cost money, especially early on. Although Sulik is better off with a sledgehammer to start, so it's not so bad. Eventually this stops mattering as much. You make more money, and you find more loot as you progress, but early on the companions are only so much help to you. Still, numbers in battle are great, and I always like to have a party alongside me, so I'm super appreciative of being able to set up their strategies now. To add even more depth to them, a few companions have talking heads and voice acting as well. Not all of them, mind you, but Sulik, Marcus, Myron, all have talking heads, with plenty of dialogue for you to engage with. Sulik will even have a mechanic where we can get the spirit's opinion on whatever location we are in, and Sulik will relay that back to us. It doesn't work for every area, but it does often prove that he's telling the truth about them. So while this is nice, I won't say there's a ton of depth to any of these characters. Many companions have their moments, usually short-lived, but they are more one-dimensional after that. Sulik talks to spirits and wants to save his sister, but we don't hear about his sister much, if at all, after acquiring him due to it being cut. Marcus will tell us a lot about how he ended up in Broken Hills after we meet him, and his opinions on the Vault Dweller and the Master, but not much else on our travels. And Myron will tell us a lot about Jet and more. There's definitely some depth and information to get out of these guys, but we do not watch them develop and grow the same way we watch the companions from New Vegas. Not even close. Companions in Fallout 2 are more for flavor and effectiveness. However, they can grow in other ways. Characters have various stages they advance through based on the advancement of your own character, and these stages are unique to each companion. For example, Sulik has 6 stages he can advance to, while Lenny the Ghoul only has 3. Companions only start checking for advancement when your character is at a specific minimum level prerequisite. Sulik needs the player to be at least level 6 and then will level up himself every 3 levels up to 6 times. With these levels comes special upgrades and skill advancements based on what the characters specialize in. Chris Avallone shows some examples of this within the Fallout Bible, but doesn't have any examples of actual skill advancements. Additionally, companions do not subtract from your own experience gain, so they are almost always universally a benefit to the player. Overall, the companions have seen huge upgrades in their effectiveness, and at least have initial backstories that are slightly more fleshed out than we are used to from the first game. While some games go into more detail and development with party members as characters rather than tools, classic Fallout games seem to have less of a focus on this social aspect, which I continue to be disappointed by. Still, there are moments here and there, like with Vic when we finally get to Vault City, but that's a ways away. Learning that Vic may be somewhere in the den, that makes it the next settlement to head towards. It's just southeast of Klamath, so you shouldn't run into too many random encounters yet, but it's best to be prepared regardless. The den definitely feels bigger than Klamath, but it's only really 2 maps, making up the east and west side respectively. Like Klamath, there are multiple quests to complete here, and I should mention again that I won't always go into detail over every quest, but more key quests that I think are important as they can make up the central storyline or themes surrounding a location. Others are just silly and sometimes have aspects worth talking about. If your version of the game has children, be warned that the kids in the den will try to steal from you when you walk past them. This seems to have some sort of cooldown, but I bypass it entirely by entering combat and walking past them. This way, they don't get any opportunity to do anything to me. I believe that since children are just made invisible in some versions, they can technically still function and steal from you even if you can't see them. The den, like many towns we will run into, is made up of the rougher sort, with a drug culture developing. However, this isn't even close to how bad we'll see it in other locations like New Reno and Redding. Rather, it acts more as an introduction to the concept of Jet, the most prolific drug in Fallout 2, and how it affects people. Everyone is trying to survive here by any means necessary. Some do that by being part of a gang, others do it through organized stealing like with the kids, and some try to scam you. Others run casinos, bars, and the like for more honest work, but the biggest and most powerful group in the den are Metzger and his slavers. Make no mistake though, Jet is the name of the game, and even Metzger is trying to profit off of that as well. With so many people trying to survive or escape, it's the perfect opportunity for someone to try and capitalize on that. Funny words there. While drugs were an issue in Fallout 1, they are even more so now. Civilization has slowly started rebuilding and coming together, but products like Jet are looking to tear all of that down. People are getting violent, desperate, and addicted, while those in power look to profit off of them, meaning there is a more prominent look at power structures and how individuals look to take advantage of those weaker than them, mostly through addiction and slavery. Slavery is huge in the wasteland at this time, and there are very few looking to do anything about it. Even Vault City has slaves. Luckily, a sub-faction of the NCR is looking to do something about it, and that'll have a rippling effect all the way into New Vegas. The closest bar to the entrance belongs to Rebecca, who has a couple quests for us. Basic stuff, like getting her money back and a book following it. The cool thing about the money quest is that when you go to take it back from Fred, you can let him keep the funds and he'll pay you back later. I never remember doing this, and I even completed the game without going back to him. Luckily, you can keep playing after the ending, so I was able to get footage for it after remembering it just now. Fred is super appreciative of you helping him out, and he can pay upwards of $2,000 plus some items, so it's worth going back at some point. Near the end of the game, this is chump change, but if you are in the area after a couple in-game months, I recommend it. Rebecca has the cheapest whiskey in town. There's another bar called The Hole that also sells whiskey, but it's more expensive. If you have purchased or heard about Becky's whiskey before, you can ask why it's so expensive at this other establishment. The proprietor will have you look into it, and you can sneak into Becky's basement to find a still. How you sneak in isn't immediately clear, but if you case the joint, the guard by the door will eventually walk away to hit on someone. If you don't have the patience to think about this and don't wait to see what happens, you may never know this is a mechanic. The proprietor of the hole will ask you to destroy the still so he can have competitive prices against Becky. You can use speech to convince him to just buy directly from Becky and sell for slightly more than her, allowing them to both profit, but I ended up failing this. Not wanting to ruin Becky's business for some jealous old man, I decided to walk away from the quest. The amount of times you'll deal with an alcohol still in a quest in Fallout 2 is more than twice, which may surprise you. Seems to be a running theme in the game. I enjoy how some of the smaller quests feel connected in ways. You can learn something about Becky and then use that information to unlock another quest somewhere else in town. Then you have several options on how to go about things. Do you sneak in or blast your way into Becky's basement? Do you destroy her still or choose not to? Do you figure out how to convince the owner of the hole to work with her? While these don't contribute at all to the end of the game, they add to the world building experience while providing you plenty of options on how you think you'd go about things. On the east side of town, you can find a diner run by someone named Mom. She'll ask you to deliver a meal to a man named Smitty back on the west end. When you do, you may notice a highwayman that is almost in working condition. If you mess with it, Smitty will come out to stop you, but you can deliver the meal and ask him about the car if you want to. Smitty will explain that if he has the right part, a fuel controller, and $2,000, he'd be willing to not only fix the car but hand it over to us. A huge boon for traveling through the wasteland. We have a fuel cell regulator from Klamath, but not a controller, and we won't get one until we reach Gecko. So for now there's not much more to say about the Highwayman, but keep it in the back of your mind. There's a local gang we can help out in town, run by a woman named Lara. In reality, there seem to be two competing gangs, one for Lara and another run by Tyler, who guards a church full of chemical shipments for Metzger. While these two have more than animosity, we unfortunately only get to work for and side with one of them, that being the former. If we ask for work, Laura will tell us to figure out what is going on inside the church. This quest is odd because I'm pretty sure the only way to complete it properly is through speech checks, which I imagine not everyone will be able to do. While the concept of specialists being required for certain quests is appealing, the idea of Fallout 1 was that there would always be multiple differing avenues of approach to get the job done. And just a note, looking into it now, if you wait an hour you can get in without the check so you aren't locked out of anything. It just feels weird that you only have one real option, and if that fails you get away with it anyway. At least the speech check can also be tied to strength instead if you have it high enough. What you learn in the church is what I already mentioned. Metzger is using Tyler's gang to hold onto chemicals for him. It's not clear yet, but he's acting as a middleman between Vault City, who provides the chemicals, and New Reno, who use them to create Jet. Seeing an opportunity, Lara will ask you to talk to Metzger about some unknown plan. He knows what she's talking about and explains that he already gave her the chance at something like this, but she turned it down. However, if she is able to do something about Tyler, that would show him that she is more right for the job. Essentially, she wants to take over guarding the chemicals for pay, and if Tyler can't stop her, there's no reason for him to be guarding anything. Metzger will give permission for a gang war, and Lara will then ask you to find a weakness in Tyler's gang that would allow Lara and her gang to assault the church easier. However, this again seems to require solely a speech check, where Tyler will explain that he and some of his men are going to a party later, leaving the church less defended. Lara will force you to tag along for the assault to make sure it isn't a trap, but explains that you don't have to kill anyone. You might as well, as there's no downside to it, but it's hardly necessary. So the largest quest chain in the den ends up being a story of investigation and war, an interesting concept that you'd imagine being full of options and ways for you to go about it. Unfortunately, it ends up being one of the more linear experiences in the game and really feels out of place based on what we would expect coming from Fallout 1. It's not a bad quest, but it could have been better. And it should have been because that's what Fallout is, a game of choices and options. The more quests that are linear in nature, the less identity the game holds as a Fallout experience. Speaking of Metzger, we can ask around town and find out that Vic is being held by him. Metzger not only unofficially runs the den, but he's also a slave master and has taken Vic in as property. We can learn from Metzger that this is due to Vic trying to scam him by selling him a broken radio before trying to skip town. Now Vic is trapped, and we need him, so we need to get him out. There's a couple of ways to go about this. The most obvious is that you could kill all the slavers, but that'd be fairly difficult for you at this point in the game. Options like that can be there, but are limited to your own capabilities within combat, meaning it's not much of an option at all, unless you want to come back later. However, killing Metzger is something you should consider doing eventually before the end of the game, as the townspeople do not like him, and it'll lead to a specific ending for the den once you finish the game. The more intended way to free Vic is to get the ability to talk to Vic by asking Metzger and then learning that Vic needs the parts to fix the radio. Back at his shack in Klamath, he had a working radio, and if you brought it with you, you can just hand it over. However, that's still not enough. Since Vic slighted Metzger, he still wants compensation in the name of $1,000. Quite the sum this early on, but not impossible to obtain by any means. If you're playing a female character and up for it, you can sleep with him to lower the cost by 50%. See, sex actually has some function and use here and there. Regardless of how you go about it, we can ask Vic about the location of Vault 13, but he won't know what we are talking about, instead pointing us towards Vault City. He got the 13 flask from a man named Ed over there too, so regardless if it's the right vault or not, we still need to head that way for more information. Once you get a better look at the map as a whole, you'll start to see how the game tries to direct you the complete opposite way from Vault 13, giving you reason to explore all of the locations on the eastern end of California before looking back around to the west. Something else to note is that you can join up as a slaver yourself. This won't help you free Vic, but it is an option, albeit a limiting one, as you get a reputation title that prevents some quests from being completed, as, shocker, people don't really like slavers all that much. I didn't participate in slavery within this playthrough, but it's nice to have these more evil-centric options. They punish you heavily, but that's the consequence of doing bad deeds. Vic can join up as another companion if you have the space, and you can be on your way, but there's one other quest I want to talk about due to the supernatural elements presented. In the West End is a man named the Great Ananias. He mostly runs scams to make money, like having people pay him to show a mummy in a coffin that is really just a ghoul. He'll also tell you the story of some ghost of a princess haunting the room next to him. The thing is, this is sort of real. You can actually find the ghost of a woman around midnight within the den. So ghosts are just real in the Fallout universe, and this wouldn't be the last time you saw something adjacent to that in terms of supernatural. Fallout 3 has the Dunwich building as just one example, but there are many more as the series went on. The supernatural is nothing new to Fallout, but I have seen many online claims that it feels out of place in games like Fallout 3 onward. I chalk this up to them not realizing that the games have always had aspects of this since the original with Psychers and Fallout 2 with ghosts and shamans. For the ghost of Anna to pass on, she wants to find her lost locket. You can ask around the den and Mom will point you to a man named Joey. Sure enough, he has it, and there are a few ways you can get it from him. The main way I like to go is persuasion, but I think I ended up pissing him off because we had a firefight instead. You could barter for the amulet or steal it as well, so there is the typical trifecta of options for you to choose from that almost every quest should have, but don't. If you bring the amulet, Anna will pass on, and you can then bring her bones to the east side graveyard and bury them for her. Graves are oddly prevalent throughout Fallout 2 and usually hold some sort of item within them to find. However, you lose karma for digging them up and will earn the grave robber reputation title, although this affects much less than the slaver or child killer ones. Burying Anna doesn't count as grave robbing luckily, so you're really just doing a good thing here. A cool thing to point out is that talking to Sulik and having him commune with Grampy Bones reveals that they sense the spirit of Anna here in the den, sort of solidifying that he does have the supernatural power of talking to ghosts of the dead. The den has a lot to offer to the player and plenty of reasons to return, such as Metzger or the Highwayman later. In my opinion, it acts as the first true full settlement to explore and do things in, and I think it manages to do that well without offering so much that it overwhelms the player. I feel as though less is more in games like this, but Fallout 2 generally doesn't try to follow that very often. This can lead to locations that feel like they have too much going on, and then other locations that feel like they could have used way more love and care. Before we leave, you may also notice a small outpost/bunker with a Brotherhood of Steel member standing outside of it. There are a few of these outposts throughout the wasteland, and while the individuals guarding them seem to know us, we don't get any real information out of this. At least we won't for some time. You can ask them like a single question, I think, and then they don't let you ask another, so ask the right one if you want something answered. There will come a point where we get to learn more about what happened to the Brotherhood of Steel in those 80 years once we reach San Francisco. Since Vic pointed us towards Vault City, you'd imagine that we would head there next, and you'd be right, but there is a town we will run into directly east of us if we start making our way over there. That town is Modoc, and has some equally absurd characters and quests to experience, and will further solidify how silly Fallout 2 tries to be in comparison to its predecessor. We arrive at Modoc, but back at the den there's a man named Carl inside of Mom's diner. Carl is a drunk and seems to be terrified by something surrounding a farm near our new location. Specifically, he tells us about how he would see glowing creatures that were stealing his crops and cattle. Carl stayed at this farm alone and tried to tell the people of Modoc about what was going on, but nobody believed him. When it became too much, he got up and left to go drown his sorrows at the den. Modoc is similarly a farming settlement, however, a drought much like that of Arroyo is causing several issues within the town. It's to the point that a bottle of water costs $1,000 to purchase from here. However, we learn that there is a farm thriving not too far from here, the farm that Carl, a villager from Modoc, was sent to run. Now believing him to have been killed, the people of Modoc keep away from the farm for several reasons that we'll see shortly. A villager named Joe will ask us to check out the farm for them. Apparently the farm just appeared out of nowhere, hence why Carl was sent to check it out. When Carl disappeared, the villagers went to look for him and were horrified to find several bodies strewn about and crucified around the farm. On top of the drought and ghost woes, Balthus, the local tanner, can tell us that his son is missing. You can easily convince him to tell us about this if you have high karma, as word of your deeds will slowly be spreading throughout the wastes. So Johnny is missing and we can look for him. Balthus will even give us a dog named Laddie that will follow us and direct us to a local well. Yeah, Johnny's stuck in a well. Potentially. If we use a rope to head down, we can find some collapsed rocks in a tunnel, along with a child's BB gun, most likely belonging to Johnny. We can return it to Balthus and suggest that Johnny probably died in a cave-in. However, despite telling Balthus this, Laddie will not leave your party, suggesting there is still something to do. We'll come back to Johnny, but there's still a few things of note to talk about in Modoc proper. Despite the trouble the town is facing and the gravity of the situation, Modoc is a rather silly location to explore. Many of the quests and interactions surrounding it don't really feel like they fit the theme of what is happening. As people run out of food and water, you can enter into an eating contest at the local diner, find a death claw in a chicken pen, and blow up a toilet covering the entire town in feces in order to find a gold pocket watch for a senile old man. It's just such a heavy contrast to the serious situation at hand, and it hits you over and over again, detracting from it. It's hard to take Modoc seriously, to understand the dire needs of the settlers when everything is so comically ridiculous here. What do you mean a local diner manages to collect Deathclaw eggs from a trapped Deathclaw where there is only one entrance to the shack and it's covered by boulders? Do they move the boulders every day? How do they get the egg without dying? It doesn't make any sense, and it's only there for the bit. That's all fine and good when contained, but this is a standard issue for a lot of Fallout 2 as a whole. There's just so much insanity throughout the game, it tends to overshadow the darker elements, which is the reverse of what is supposed to be happening. Fallout 1 strove to be a dark game with elements of humor within. Meanwhile, Fallout 2 can feel like a comedy with the odd dark storyline here and there. I'm not saying the game can't be like that, but it's not what you expect coming from Fallout 1 by any means. Fallout 2 is, for all intents and purposes, a set of carnival rides in a circus, and everyone you run into is a clown. Even the quests surrounding the ghost farm, that seems like it is going somewhere serious, ends up being not what you expect at all. And while that can be an interesting reveal, it just feels so exhausting to learn that everything is either misunderstandings or jokes. So far, Fallout 2 has failed to really delve into who people are and why they are like that. People hate tribals, people are slavers, there is evil in the world, but we don't really understand why, and we don't really explore that all that much. It's just something for us to deal with, which has its own value in a way, but it would have been more interesting to really delve into these concepts, instead of just having them there for what feels like flavor. That being said, while the absurdity is there and can feel out of place, you gotta hand it to them for the creativity. Turning an entire town into a sewage dump was not what I expected coming into Modoc for the first time. Or getting a shotgun wedding because an individual's father catches you blowing his son/daughter's back out. You even get a title for that and a permanent companion, if you want it. Did you know Fallout 2 had one of the earliest examples of same-sex marriage in a video game? I didn't until making this video. It's not all bad. Like I said, I think creativity is there. You can tell the developers that were assigned to specific parts of the game were given a lot of free reign for better or worse. And the main questline of Modoc, dealing with the ghost farm, has some interesting mechanics I want to go over. We'll see that revelation of mechanics as we figure out what's going on over there, so let's take a look now. When you arrive at the farm, it's as bad as described. Bodies are crucified throughout as a warning to anyone stumbling upon it that this is not a safe haven, and that you should be on your way. It's very important that you properly examine these bodies using the Examine tool by selecting it from the mouse menu. This is how you, as the player, can try to get more detailed information on anything you see at a glance. The main reasons for doing this now is that you will observe that these bodies are nothing more than dummies covered in the innards of Brahmin, a mutated cow-like animal found within the Fallout universe. This is one of two keys to solving the upcoming issue the best way you can, and it's obscure in that sense. Nothing tells you this was important or that this can be used later, and rarely does examining something in this way provide anything other than flavor and detail for the player behind the character. With perks like awareness, this allows you to see enemy hit point values, but I'm talking more about the role-playing and quest progression aspect. Despite the grotesque display, the farm is empty and quiet. If you spend some time investigating, you will most likely fall through some loose floorboards in the nearby building and find yourself underground. However, you can also wait until nighttime, where some individuals appear and seem to be glowing, which is what Carl mistook for ghosts. The truth of it is that these are neither ghosts nor ghouls, though. Rather, they are individuals who have covered themselves in a glowing fungus to give off the illusion of the supernatural. These are the Slags, a group of individuals who live underground due to being left there since the Great War. Living underground for so long has mutated them to the point that living outside is unsustainable. Add in the fear of falling upward into the night sky and you basically have Fallout's version of dwarves. The sun's too bright, the night sky is too scary, and they can't function properly outside. The individuals that find us seem peaceful in nature, not wanting to attack, but demanding we see their leader, Vigir. With Vigir, we learn that, despite this inability to live topside, the Slags needed to create some sort of food source out there in order for their ever-expanding population to survive. While difficult for them, the Slags managed to create a farm in secret and over time, explaining why the residents of Modoc believe it came out of nowhere. The reason for the crucifixes and the fake ghosts is to scare off hostile individuals due to attacks in the past. It was this act of scaring people that caused Carl to lose it and run off to the den. But the Slags aren't unreasonable, and they just want to live their own lives. There's nothing particularly nefarious about them. Vigir wants to make a deal with Modoc where they would provide food for medical supplies, and he is willing to let us leave if we agree to be the messenger. Yes, despite being peaceful, they are still willing to protect themselves. If we posed a danger, they would fight back, and they can't risk knowledge of their home getting out to just anyone. However, an alliance would be beneficial to all. So are the Slags secretly evil and just using us for some ill-begotten reason? Well, not really. If we travel through their underground settlement, we can find a nursery/daycare of sorts where all the children are kept. Sure enough, Johnny is here, but he wasn't kidnapped. Rather, when Johnny disappeared, he seemed to be found by Vigir and the Slags, who then took care of him in their home. So everything is just a misunderstanding and nothing more. Johnny won't necessarily believe you are there to bring him home unless you can prove it to him by telling him the name of his father, but I couldn't even get Vigir to talk to me again after talking to Johnny, as I had to complete the mission he gave me first. I believe there is a way to get him to talk to you about Johnny, but regardless, he won't let the kid go until he can trust us. Not in a kidnapping way, again, but they all seem to care for Johnny and want to make sure he is safe. When we return to Joe from Modoc, he'll need some convincing in believing the Slags are all peaceful after what the town has seen of them. However, this is probably one of the cooler aspects of the entire game, as simple conversations and observations you've had in the past can be used here to explain the situation. It's not immediately obvious to the player when they talk to Carl or examine the bodies that these can be used later, or that you can go back and make these realizations to convince Joe. If you've already done these tasks, you can inform Joe right away that Carl is actually alive and not dead like they thought. You can also tell them that the bodies are fake and just there for scare tactics. So little things like that, interacting with the environment around you, end up having a huge payoff later for getting the best outcome within the quest chain. Luckily, if you don't have this info yet, Joe will give you a deadline of a month to find proof that the Slags are fine, and then you need to do some detective work to figure out what is really going on anyway. I just enjoy the idea that due diligence and a sense of curiosity within the game can have such advantages without you even realizing it until the end where it all comes together. If you don't get this information for Joe, or you don't feel like doing it, Modoc will opt to attack the farm and kill all the Slags. You can also participate in this battle as well, but you are dooming the settlement, as the only reason the farm is even worthwhile is due to how the Slags figured out how to take care of it. Fear and misunderstandings can lead to the doom of two separate settlements within Fallout. Like the main theme of Fallout says, war never changes, and it is humanity's fear, greed, and defensiveness that can lead to these forms of hostility, among many other causes. It's thanks to individuals like the Chosen One or the Vault Dweller, individuals inherently curious and looking to do good and make change, that we see the real change take place. It requires effort and understanding to make peace. It is not impossible. War does change. Don't listen to them. Don't listen. It's a slogan that they put in a video game. It's not law. While humanity may often fall into conflict with one another, it doesn't have to be this way, and I believe Modoc is the perfect example of that. A lesson early on that while the opening of the game may sound pessimistic and doomed, that isn't truly the case. Much like with what I said in Fallout 1, despite the game being lauded as dark and grim, the creators love to shine the light of hope through the darkness and show you that things don't always have to be like this, that we can have growth and change. That part of humanity is this growth and this optimism, this hope that we can strive for. Peace and tranquility is possible within us, and the individuals that can accomplish this and try to pass this on make the most positive changes to society. If you manage to broker the deal and then ask Vigir about it, he'll let Johnny go home, stating that he'll do so despite everyone caring about him and feeling like he is part of their community. I wonder how Johnny feels about coming back after seeing the entire town covered in the aftermath of an exploding toilet. Oh well. Modoc was, if anything, a side area, somewhere to spend time in that wouldn't necessarily progress the storyline or main quest for us. It's about examining prejudice through fear and misunderstanding, and how we can overcome that. And for that, I think it ends up being one of the more important locations in the game, despite all the silly nonsense contained within. But again, this is just a pit stop. We still need to push on further east so that we can finally see if Vault City is the vault we are looking for. If you forgot, the reason we have the idea of finding Vault City is because Vic suggested we check it out. This is where he found the Vault 13 water flask after all. However, there's a bit of an issue. Vault City is a closed-off community, so figuring out if this is the vault that we need is going to take a fair amount of work. Vault City is willing to help others, sort of. They don't let just anyone live within the walls of their community, but do provide an outer region that is guarded by security. To get inside properly, you need a day pass, and as the name suggests, you have a limited amount of time within to do anything. To become a full resident, you need citizenship papers you can only get from the council, but there are temporary/limited ways around this. A day pass can be obtained in a multitude of ways. As an example, you can steal one, offer to deal with an issue of raiders, or show up in your vault uniform and convince one to be handed to you, plus many other options. The game wants you to get into Vault City because you have to, so it offers an assortment of different ways to go about this. Even better, you can pay to get some forged citizenship papers that allow you to walk around freely, although these fail under more scrutiny, so you need to be careful. Regardless of how you try to get in, there's some stuff to do in the immediate area that is important to our journey and learning more about Vault City as a whole. First of all, we can meet Ed, and he'll explain that he doesn't know where he found the flask exactly, but he used to do a big circle of a Brahmin drive through the wasteland and marks several locations on your map, such as New Reno, Broken Hills, and Redding. This opens up our options on where we should look for information on Vault 13 without giving us a singular destination to stop by. Now the game is opening up to us even more, and it's our choice, as it ever has been, to decide where to go next. We still have the vault immediately ahead of us that could be what we need, so it's incentive to check it out, as Ed isn't sure which vault is which. Vault City is an isolated colony. They want to be self-sufficient and are incredibly strict on who is allowed to be part of their community. They will help others, but only so much, and this causes some strain with those that want inside, and has its own problems with the city as a whole since it wants to expand. The first citizen, who is basically the leader of the community, will have a lot to say about this aspect. Add on to this that they charge for this protection, and there's quite a bit of tension. There's a bar near us where we can meet Cassidy, the individual who runs the place. Cassidy is constantly harassed by security from Vault City, as they don't allow residents in or outside of the walls to drink real alcoholic products, choosing instead to sell synthetic brands they make themselves. We can convince him to ditch the place and join us, and I recommend it as Cassidy is one of the best members of my team throughout the rest of the journey. Fun fact, he's the father of Rose of Sharon Cassidy, or Cass from Fallout New Vegas. To give an example of further tensions, a woman in a tent nearby will let us know that her husband Joshua got into a fight in the nearby bar and struck a citizen. This led to his arrest, but they weren't simply holding him there. Remember, many Vault City residents see outsiders as lesser than. With that in mind, they have no qualms with turning to slavery. Now, they don't call it slavery, mind you, they like to use the term servant, but it's all the same. Prison labor is slave labor, and even if you aren't a prisoner due to a crime, Vault City is perfectly happy buying slaves to turn into servants. You can actually sell your companions into slavery here and back with Metzger if you feel like it. Despite the dressing up of terminology and the idea that they are better and more civilized as a society, Vault City still falls into many of the same pitfalls as anywhere else. Prejudice, slavery, greed. These are all things that the people of Vault City are guilty of, and it's costing them in the long term while hurting others in the short. This isn't what makes Vault City a successful civilization. In fact, we are going to see how this limits them more than anything. Rather, their initial growth was due to a Gecko, and we'll learn more about that in a bit. In the meantime, we can acquire a day pass and some forged citizenship papers before heading inside to take our first look at how people are living here. The first thing you may notice is the overwhelming amount of greenery compared to what you may be used to in the wasteland. This isn't the norm, mind you, but California settlements have managed to develop fairly well over the last 80 years, especially with the help of a Gecko like in Vault City, and with this growth and success comes a lot of isolation. When people see you, they see someone who is an outsider, constantly making comments about how you better have your pass and you better not be here at nighttime. The general civilian doesn't trust outsiders, and while there can be valid reasoning for that in such a dangerous time, this cushy living is having many fall back into the old ways of humanity. One of the major problems we can learn about currently is the issue with raiders attacking the outside camp regularly. Despite managing to break through the defenses, these raiders often retreat before doing any real damage. Sergeant Stark, who runs security in Vault City, can ask us to look into it for him and give us a general location of where to find them, but we'll be doing that a bit later. It's a really tough fight at this point, at least it was for me. We can also run into Vic's daughter Valerie here, who does the repairs around the city. There's a small scene if you have Vic with you where we learn he made it to Vault City at one point before sleeping with Valerie's mother, which led to her conception. At some point, Vic disappeared and ended up living strictly in Klamath, seemingly due to issues with Valerie's mother, who even Valerie refers to negatively. Valerie doesn't want much to do with Vic, but you can convince her to give her father a chance if you want. This is about as far a backstory as we get with Vic, and one of the only ones that you really feel developed through your travels, despite not being much. Valerie can also be given pliers and a wrench as she is waiting for a shipment of super toolkits. If you do this, she'll give you an extra one the next day, which is important for something coming up in Gecko, so I highly recommend it. Wrenches can be rare, but you can get one from a kid outside the city walls by finding his doll and returning it to him. He'll give you like the general location on where to find it. Further into town is the council office and the vault. Even with forged papers, you can't get into the vault properly unless you are recognized by the guards or have permission from the first citizen. So it's best to finally head over and meet the infamous Lynette, who Fallout players have despised since the dawn of time. Let me just start off by saying I'm not defending Lynette. When you meet her, you can tell she's a bigot. She hates outsiders, but more than that, she really just looks down on everyone. She's had an easy life with a little hardship, and this has developed her personality. A holier-than-thou, conceited individual who is essentially spoiled by the power of the Gecko and how it was used to develop Vault City before the residents had any real difficulties with the wasteland. Is she evil? I wouldn't say that necessarily. Very rarely in this game are individuals purely evil. She's complex and has had an easy, isolated upbringing that has made her the way she is. That's no excuse for her bad deeds, such as the slaves Vault City holds, or extorting individuals that are looking for help. But I wouldn't say she's as bad as Metzger or the actual villains in the series like Frank Horgan and the President of the United States. Despite that, you will probably never hear individuals talk with as much disdain about Metzger, Frank, or the President the way they do about Lynette. Hell, someone asked Chris Avallone why Lynette is such a bitch in the Fallout Bible, and he agrees that she is, calling her it twice in his explanation. People that play Fallout 2 hate Lynette more than any other character in this entry and potentially in the series, but why? There are individuals clearly much worse than her, so what is so special about Lynette that she has such a reputation among players? Well, I don't think I really need to spell it out for you. On top of being a talking head with voice dialogue, which I'm sure adds to her impact, Lynette is both a woman and a person of color. This puts her under a much more prominent microscope of judgment than other characters in the game. You don't see people lamenting about how Frank blew through a family of farmers with a minigun, but you will surely hear about how awful Lynette is for some reason. You gotta ask yourself, what could be the difference here? And it starts to become pretty clear if you aren't purposefully ignorant about it. So is Lynette actually a good person and a lot of this disdain for her is misplaced? No, Lynette is an awful individual who will ban you from the town if you look at her wrong and looks to actively do harm to another settlement near here called Gecko. She sucks for sure, but she doesn't suck more than any of the other more distasteful characters in the game. It's not about conserving resources either, Lynette just hates outsiders. If she cared about growth and resources, she'd be more positive about fixing the reactor we will run into shortly. But she is prejudiced against ghouls. We can ask Lynette about the Gecko, and she will wonder how an outsider knows about something like that. Ignoring her views on outsiders, we can press for more information, but she doesn't seem to be willing to divulge anything to non-citizens. Lynette points us to Gregory, another council member who can administer the citizenship test. But passing this requires at least 9 in perception, intelligence, and luck, so unless you planned ahead for that or have the required drugs/upgrades, that's probably not how you're gonna go about it. Nice that it's an option at least, as it could save us a lot of walking, but it's better to hear Lynette out as she has another option. Lynette is willing to have us prove ourselves by heading to the town of Gecko northeast of here. Gecko is populated by ghouls, which she refers to as creatures, but the real issue is the nuclear power plant they have that seems to be seeping out radiation. Since the ghouls are immune to radiation, it's no problem for them, but Lynette is worried about poisoning their city due to the close proximity. A fair worry and something we could definitely look into, but Lynette has specific expectations out of our involvement, namely disabling the power plant permanently so that it can't cause any future problems. The ghouls use the plant. Despite being heavily irradiated, they still like having power and infrastructure. They are still people after all, even if she doesn't see that, and this plays into both her bigotry to the outside world and mutants, as well as further showcasing the overall bigotry of Vault City as a whole. Lynette won't be happy with any solution that isn't disabling the plant, because her ignorance and prejudice is preventing her from seeing the larger picture. She doesn't care that much about protecting the city. More so, she wants to hurt those around them. Securing the city from the outside world by sabotaging others, it's an idea, but a crude one, and one that would hurt innocent individuals simply because she doesn't like them. So yeah, Lynette sucks, just like many other characters suck in Fallout 2. This isn't new, and this isn't some special aspect about her, although you'd think otherwise when hearing about her online. We have our first reason to head the Gecko, but we can also be given another mission to scout out the grids surrounding the town as well, and then also plot a course from Vault City to the NCR. We can also find a man named Thomas More who became a citizen of Vault City by passing that insane test Gregory administers. Thomas seems to be a crazy preacher-style individual, but with the amount of intellect and perception he must have, you may be wondering if there is more to him than there seems to be. If you talk to him, he can ask you to deliver a briefcase to New Reno for the bishops, one of the mob families there. We'll start to learn that the bishops want more out of Vault City than we are even partially aware of at the moment, considering this may be the first time we are even hearing of them. When we arrive at Gecko, we can almost immediately run into Harold. Harold is a mutated individual, not necessarily a ghoul, from the first game who lived in the hub at the time. Harold begrudgingly runs things around here because he's a nice guy like that. After traveling away from the hub, he eventually found Gecko and settled in to help the ghouls. The issue is that the ghouls all seem to be rather stupid, and that makes running a nuclear reactor without it melting down fairly difficult. Harold gives an example of the ghouls trying to shut off the coolant valve, which would have destroyed the area and everyone within it. Harold will explain further that a hydroelectric magnetosphere regulator is necessary to keep the reactor from leaking radiation. He understands the issue this leak is causing in terms of Vault City, and wants to prevent them from growing weary of Gecko and attacking, which Lynette has sort of sent us here to do, in a way. Rather than outright attacking, she wants us to sabotage them, but Harold makes it seem like there's another option. The issue is that the required part is most likely held by Vault City, and they can't approach the city without being attacked. Well, isn't it just perfect that we came along? By the way, Lenny the Doctor here can also be a companion, and the terminal in the reactor is where you get those iconic scenes with the frustrated Enclave soldier. You probably know the ones I'm talking about, but like here's a little sample.
Enclave here. Why isn't your video feed working? Who the hell is this? Chosen one, huh? Well, pardon me for not blowing sunshine up your ass, but I'm a little too busy for this, Your Highness. Oh, you a wise guy, huh? Look, I'm tracing you right now, pal. We'll see how smart you feel with internal security all over your freaking ass, dickhead. A few more moments and I'll have your sorry ass in a sling. Hey, wait a minute. This can't be right. I've got you somewhere on the mainland. Well, whoever you are, I just dispatched a Verdi assault team to your location. Have a nice day. Usually they just go in shooting. They let someone else sift through the ashes to figure out what was going on. Yeah. Goodbye. Next news on you will be when I read the after-action report. I've got you at Poseidon Oil, reactor number 5. Well, why don't you just sit tight and I'll order up a little celebration for you, including fireworks. President of the United fucking States of America. Who do you think I was talking about? The fuck? Who is it? What? I should kick your fucking ass. Who is this?
You can see the issue here. Lynette wants one thing, Gecko wants another, but it's clear that the residents of Gecko aren't doing anything detrimental on purpose. They're just both stupid and stuck with no option since Vault City won't trade with them. So you have to ask yourself, what's the best course of action here? The most obvious answer is to find someone willing to give us the part in Vault City, but Lynette sure as hell won't. Luckily, she isn't the only council member there, and we can talk to McClure instead. I'm serious, crossing Lynette at all in any capacity gets you kicked out because she hates your guts and hates ghouls. The game tries to warn you of this with how she talks to you and how the other council members seem more reasonable. It's heavily implied you should go behind her back if you want any real progress done. It's easy enough to convince McClure that this is the best course of action, as it would solve the problem of the reactor without putting anyone out. He'll also be willing to make us a citizen regardless of what Lynette thinks, so this is the de facto good guy option that makes everyone happy. It's generally very easy to make everyone happy in this game, surprisingly, unless they are just straight up villainous. If you get the part, you can take it back to the plant and install it in a few ways. The easiest for me was convincing a ghoul named Festus to do it for me because going to install it would put you through an irradiated death bath. You can also program a robot to do it or do it yourself as long as you were quick and have the resources like RadX and RadAway. Just easier to have the ghoul do it in my opinion, and I love building speech check characters when possible, so of course I'm going to use that. Assuming you fix the reactor instead of disabling it or causing a catastrophic meltdown, Festus, the guy we sent to install the part, will discuss optimizing the plant with you. This would allow Gecko to produce an excess of power. Festus will hand a holodisk to us that McClure will allow us to run on a computer within the vault, which we can now access as a citizen. By using the computer to optimize the reactor holodisk, Gecko will be in a much better spot. Once the power plant is optimized, you can talk to a ghoul named Gordon who will give you a Gecko holodisk, which holds economic data explaining that the excess of power from the optimized plant could be sold to Vault City. Due to its growing population, Vault City is reaching a breaking point in terms of how much they can expand with the power they have. Gaining power from Gecko would help fix this. If you bring it up to Harold, he'll be less than impressed, believing Vault City will use this as an excuse to limit Gecko by cutting off their supply of uranium from Broken Hills, and forcing their hand into trade deals. Luckily, bringing this info to McClure is enough to get him to want to set up a deal with Gecko rather than inhibit them. Due to a glitch fixed in one of the patches I am using, you can't get the best ending for the alliance between Gecko and Vault City, so you may think you've doomed them, but this turns out to be the proper course of action if you want the two to coexist in peace. Bugged ending slides are commonplace in Fallout 1 and 2. I discussed some of them in the end of the first video, but since they are fixed via a patch, I figure we will take a look at what could actually happen based on the appropriate actions. Lynette is an obstacle for us to overcome. Harold and Gecko are wary of Vault City because of the settlement's prejudice, and we have to circumvent this prejudice to get anything done. With bigotry comes ignorance, and if Lynette had her way, Gecko would be wiped off the map and Vault City would be doomed. She's unable to see the bigger picture, and so we have to hope there are others in power willing to do this. Luckily this time we have McClure, but that wouldn't be the case in every situation within real life, would it? Sometimes ignorance inhibits growth and social progress, and sometimes it wins out, even if only temporarily. Even Harold ends up worried about what will happen to Gecko if Vault City has the knowledge we handed them, and I don't blame him for this. He has no reason to believe the city would play nice when they are so openly hostile to both outsiders and especially ghouls. Lynette is in the way of fixing things. She's an example of how a sheltered life, without truly experiencing the wasteland, can prevent you from seeing the bigger picture. It's through worldly experience and curiosity that we learn and grow, that we build knowledge, but more importantly, empathy, something that she is missing. We still need to explore the vault itself a bit now that we have access. On the top level, we can meet a doctor who will ask us to get him a sample of Jet. If you provide it in return after a few months, he'll have created an antidote that will be important later. I've read of other ways to achieve the antidote, but this was the easiest way for me. I just went exploring through the rest of the game and continued the storyline while revisiting Vault City from time to time until he had something to show me. There's a medical computer here as well. With enough doctor skill, it will teach you about some implants that you can get installed, similar to what we could do with the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout 1. These implants can be installed by a few specific doctors found within the game world and can increase the player's damage resistance in various ways. These can then be upgraded for an even more absurd amount of money, but cost you a charisma point per upgrade as well, so I generally do not find them worth ever obtaining. There are more basic special implants we can get later that have no real downside. So these are cool options if you want them, but are ultimately useless for me in the grand scheme of things, especially with how much protection you get as the game goes on. Further into the vault, you can find crates and crates filled to the brim with water chips, a comedic reference to the Vault Dweller's original goal in Fallout 1. As the sole chip of Vault 13 had died on them, you can learn that Vault City should have had 2 Gecks and Vault 13 should have had all of these chips, but due to an error in delivery, these got swapped around. Vault City got all the chips instead, and Vault 13 got one of the city's Gecks. When you step away from the computer, you may notice that it wants to reformat your Pip Boy for maintenance. Doing so seems to have no inherent effect immediately, and instead leads into a secret after completing the game where you get 20,000 EXP over and over again as long as you want, just in case you wanted to see how powerful your chosen one could get. Similarly, we can get a hint book in New Reno after the end that raises all of our skill points to 300% while also providing a repeatable 10,000 XP bonus. While the computer confirms that at some point Vault City received a Gek, it isn't able to tell us where it is. Luckily, we have some new locations to explore, such as Redding, Broken Hills, and New Reno. But before that, there's something to finish up in Gecko that will help us immensely on our travels. The super toolkit we got from Vault City can be traded in Gecko for the car part needed to fix the Highwayman. There's also a missing ghoul that ended up somewhere in the den that we are asked to find, so there's multiple reasons to backtrack at this point, and I recommend doing so due to how useful the car is. I should mention that it was around now I got my first vision from Hakunen, who can communicate with us in our dreams. Hakunen has specific dates in which he will contact us to remind us of our mission and explain how Arroyo continues to suffer. There's no real time limit to worry about. It's a good way of keeping the player at least aware of their main goal, but I imagine this confused some players and made them believe there was a time limit since the first game had one. It turns out the ghoul we're looking for, Woody, is the mummy the con artist had in his office beside the ghost we helped out earlier. We can wake him up and send him on his way, and then finally repair the Highwayman. Since we are back in the den and we have the parts necessary to fix the Highwayman, we can head over to Smitty and pay him $2,000 to do that now. We can pay him an additional fee and install the fuel cell regulator we got as well, which lowers fuel consumption by 50%. The Highwayman is used for 2 things. It allows you to have a storage container via the trunk, and it can travel the world map faster than on foot. It's one of the biggest boons you can get for travel, as it will cut down the amount of days we spend in the game world considerably. It has the additional effect of having a base 50% chance of allowing us to skip random encounters. Since there are so many in the world, this is incredibly useful and sort of invalidates the outdoorsman skill as I mentioned earlier. Originally, the car was meant to have a more prominent role in the game. It would have unlimited fuel and would be upgraded with armor, weaponry, and speed. However, this was eventually left at the wayside, and the car only ended up being functional on the world map. One notorious bug with the car that the developers worked tirelessly to fix was the trunk of the vehicle would sometimes break off from the rest of the car and begin following the player. This was due to it being similar to a companion in order to implement the storage functionality, as this was built into companion logic already, and I believe it can still sometimes end up separated in unpatched versions of the game. Despite it not having as much functionality as originally planned, players can still upgrade the Highwayman in various ways. The regulator increases the mileage of the car considerably, and we can later temporarily lose the vehicle only to have the thief upgrade the trunk size further. We can also have a blower installed on it just outside the NCR for a speed increase, taking it from 400% of the player's walking speed to 500%. Finally, you can get grav plates after beating the game to increase the speed further. The Highwayman is one of the biggest boons you can have in this game. While you may not be able to drive it around in maps, it is one of the most helpful tools you can have when it comes to world map traversal. While there may not be a timer any longer, being able to consistently skip random encounters and get everywhere faster simply saves you time and headaches throughout your travels, especially since some quests are timed as well. Add on to this that it becomes your main bank for storing excess items, and it feels like a mandatory pickup for players who like to hoard whatever they find to sell later. However, keep in mind that to refuel the car, you need to use microfusion or small energy cells, which can be a little rare early on. I never ran out of fuel before I found them, but it is a possibility, and I think that's a nice balancing act for something so useful. With 3 new areas to explore, we can continue our search for Vault 13, but before that, let's discuss an optional area we can check out thanks to Vault City, the Raider Cave. Now, I don't have a ton to say about the caves, but they feel worth bringing up because they are a location completely focused on combat. We're asked to deal with them in Vault City and find it almost exactly south of the settlement. The Raider Caves feel like they are meant to be a combat check, to test your build and party against an onslaught of enemies before you traverse deeper into the wasteland. I found it so difficult to keep my entire party alive when I first attempted it that I opted to come back later when I was more prepared. It's a real wake-up call in that regard. Chris Avallone laments in an interview that he wishes he'd have put a little more love into the caves in comparison to Vault City and New Reno, as the cave becomes a simple combat location with nothing more to it, and I agree. Passing an outdoorsman check or obtaining a map for the cave in New Reno will have you arrive at a special entrance that makes it easier to get into the main base location. More likely, you will come to the main cave entrance instead, which is multiple zones full of traps and pitfalls that can weaken you significantly before the big fight if you aren't prepared. You don't need skills in traps to make it through here, but I do highly recommend it or a large supply of stim packs, since it's so easy to not only get yourself blown up multiple times, but also your party. Once you manage to get into the fight proper, there isn't much more to discuss. It's a difficult fight, but much like anything else you will run into, just bigger. Tons of raiders to take out who can all attack you and your party together at the same time. You need to use everything you have at your disposal in order to defeat them depending on where you are in the game at the moment. Once you defeat all the raiders, you get a boatload of loot out of it. You can collect 3 dog tags off of the 3 leaders of the group. These dog tags provide a code that can be used on a nearby safe to get an account book. The account book reveals that the raiders have been working with Bishop from New Reno in order to attack Vault City in an attempt to scare the town into allying with the NCR, as Bishop wishes to have an alliance between all 3 while he remains in power, looking to influence legal aspects of the Republic. This goes south due to our involvement, but we'll learn more about John Bishop's plan later when we make it to the city. In the meantime, the book can be returned to Lynette to inform her of why the raiders, actually mercenaries, were attacking. This and a series of other tasks from Lynette can lead to the player becoming the new captain of the guard within Vault City, allowing you to pardon Cassidy and help him obtain reparations for his bar which was damaged by Citizen Sergeant Stark. It has a few other bonuses as well, but they're all minor. Unfortunately, one of the missions, delivering holotapes between Weston of the NCR and Lynette, seemed to be lost to me, as I misplaced the holodisc I was meant to deliver, or I never got it. I don't remember her even asking me to do that. All in all, the caves are a difficult section to take part in, but they are rewarding and can help you throughout the rest of the game if you manage to overcome the trial of defeating all the mercenaries within, especially early on. It's a player skill check to make sure you are focusing at least somewhat in combat in some capacity, whether that be through your own character or party, and I think that's a necessity. Fallout may be a role-playing game focusing on social aspects and dialogue, but combat is still prominent, and you need to be ready for that often. 2 locations we visit next are mining towns. One is Redding, which focuses on gold exports, and the other is Broken Hills, which mines uranium and exports it to Gecko for their reactor. I want to focus first on Broken Hills so that we can get Marcus in the party, as he is one of my favorite companions in the classic games. When you first arrive in the town, if driving the Highwayman, you'll accidentally run over a ghoul named Lumpy. He'll reference another time in which something like this happened where a Nuka-Cola truck tipped over. This was a random encounter back in the original game. There's a greeter here you can talk to, but he wouldn't answer me until I put my weapons away. I was confused by this because after holstering my weapon, he still continued to tell me to put them away. This is because your party members need to have everything holstered as well, which I didn't even realize the game would check for until I arrived here. It's an important lesson to learn now, as this will be a much stricter rule to follow in NCR. In terms of mechanics, it's an incredibly annoying feature due to how it is handled. You get very little warning once inside of NCR to holster your weapons. Doing it yourself is easy enough, but for your party members, you need to enter a dialogue with each of them, ask them about their weapons, and have them put them away. There's no way to do this party-wide, so anytime you end up in the Republic, you gotta go through the motions. The more party members you have with weaponry, the longer it takes. Further into town, we can meet Marcus for the first time, who can tell us a lot about how Broken Hills came to be. Marcus is an intelligent super mutant who served the Master before his defeat at the hands of the Vault Dweller. After the events of the first game, Marcus ran into a Brotherhood of Steel member named Jacob and engaged in combat. After fighting continuously with no clear victor, the two eventually formed a truce/partnership and began exploring the wasteland together, picking up followers along the way. Eventually the two settled in Broken Hills and formed a community there, but Jacob would leave shortly after assuring the safety of the settlement. Marcus is a great character to talk to in order to understand some of the politics surrounding the mutants and humans. If you inform him that you are a descendant of the original Vault Dweller, he'll seem initially upset over this due to the character from the first game killing the Master and destroying the vats. Despite time shifting and mutants/humans learning to coexist, this is still a bit of a sore spot for individuals like Marcus. Despite this, he is able to acknowledge that it happened a long time ago and is attempting to move on. Marcus can further explain that they never hated humans, they just saw their option as a better way, elevating humanity through forced evolution so no one would need to fight one another anymore, rather than leaving governments to destroy humanity over and over again. Not everyone is able to hear the call and push forward for a better humanity. Jacob was able to, and Marcus admits that the Vault Dweller was as well. He sees the Master the same way, and believes the Master wanted to give everyone that same opportunity, a dream which the Vault Dweller ended. If everyone was like the Vault Dweller, we wouldn't have needed the Master at all, and in that sense, Marcus both hates and respects the Vault Dweller for what he did, recognizing that the Dweller was the best of humanity and, in a way, was what the Master strived for. It's a complicated relationship. We can press Marcus on this, claiming that the Master wanted to enslave humanity, and he'll hit us with the "I was actually there, so consider who you're talking to" line. To Marcus, who knew the mutants, they were some of the best humanity had to offer, but it's through the victor that history is written. To humans, the Master just wanted to enslave humanity, but Marcus saw something more there as someone directly involved. Marcus can understand why the Vault Dweller did what he did. In a way, he idolizes people like that, seeing the Master, Vault Dweller, and Jacob as the same type of individual. People that are able to change history and the course of humanity for greater things. However, to Marcus and many other mutants, the Master would have allowed everyone to become like that, put everyone on equal footing through forced evolution. The Vault Dweller robbed him of that idea in his eyes, despite the many complications and failures that came with the FEV. Keep in mind that not every super mutant became intelligent, and that the procedure with the VATS wouldn't have worked on everyone. Marcus probably understands this, but the Master promised a lot, and he followed him. Despite how he may feel about the Vault Dweller, he understands them. Maybe doesn't like them, but he understands, and once the Master was gone, Marcus learned how to become part of humanity once again, befriending Jacob, forming a community. Super mutants, in that sense, aren't any different from you or I. They are humans, just different from the norm. Muties versus normies, as they say. They say normies, I'm pretty sure. From exploring the motivations of the Master in my Fallout 1 video, I came to the conclusion that nothing would have changed should the Master's plan have succeeded. It wasn't going to work. Super mutants would have fallen into the same pitfalls as anyone else. It isn't humanity, it's conscious thought, free will, the ability to think and understand that you are, to have wants and desires beyond instinctual. These would have still existed. Sure, he could control some telepathically, but not the whole. As mutants would have spread throughout the world, they would have become exactly what the Master was trying to fix. Marcus here probably came to understand this. He knows what the Master wanted, respected him for trying to do it, but he also learned what it means to be human, to coexist alongside them, to befriend them and want to help them. Marcus is exactly what he reveres. He is the type of individual to go beyond and make change. He did it here in Broken Hills by making a community that breaches the boundary between mutants and normies. He'd do it again in New Vegas with a ski lodge he named Jacob's Town after his long-lost friend and ally. Marcus is one of my favorite companions in Fallout 2. Not only is he unique in being a super mutant and having a talking head, he just has a lot of history and depth to him that is more interesting to explore for me than someone like Vic. He's able to give us an alternate viewpoint on the events that transpired in Fallout 1, and allows us to delve more into the motivations of the Master and the mutants. When you're on an opposing side, it's easy to not see their viewpoint, and I don't think you necessarily have to either. But that doesn't mean it isn't at least interesting within media to see things from the perspective of what we considered the bad guys, at the time. Much like Jacob's Town, Broken Hills has its own set of problems. While humans and mutants may have become allies under Marcus and Jacob, some still hold hate and prejudice in their hearts, and we will see how this is affecting the town shortly. Broken Hills is an examination into prejudice and bigotry, how these forms of hate can build in the background of a society, and how attempting to deal with them can cause those involved to form a victim complex, despite them being the ones doing the wrong. Many of the humans here secretly hate the mutants and want to overthrow them, seeing the town as being under a dictatorship. This is despite Marcus trying to just keep things under control and everyone happy, both humans and mutants. Marcus just wants some order and fairness. He wants cooperation between the two groups, but the humans, through their hate, see this idea of cooperation as oppression and want to do something about it. One of the people running this scheme is named Jacob. Ironically named after the man who was one of the first to ally with the mutants, Jacob wants to dismantle all of that. Through some missions, you can choose to either help the humans sabotage the town against the mutants, or gain evidence to bring to Marcus, who will then imprison them under the rule of law. It's not so cut and dry though. These issues cause further problems even among the mutants. One individual, Francis, has been killing humans in an attempt to frame the anti-mutant conspiracists and have them dealt with. Taking justice into his own hands, we can find evidence of this plot and bring it to Marcus. Despite trying to do right, Francis has gone beyond what may be considered acceptable. As a means of showing that Marcus is truly fair, he deals with Francis once evidence is presented to him. Marcus doesn't take sides. There is no plot for the mutants to overthrow the humans, but Francis's actions could definitely be seen as such if brought to light. Marcus had to deal with keeping order, to be fair, and he was willing to do so because that's what he wants. Coexistence and fairness. He'll lock up any humans attempting to ruin the town, and he'll do the same to mutants. He doesn't pick sides. After solving the issues between the humans and the mutants, and fixing a filtration system in the uranium mine with parts we can get in New Reno, Marcus is willing to join our party and follow us on our journey. This would later take him further into Nevada, where he would form another community in Jacobstown. Broken Hills is an interesting exploration into how we can produce hate due to visual differences and history. Many humans have decided that their coexistence with the mutants is wrong. They are scared of the mutants and use that to form conspiracies that feed into their own hate. It is individuals like Marcus and the Vault Dweller that are necessary to keep things right, to stop this from spreading, even if it seems unjust to those that are doing the hating. Bigots will always play the victim card. They will always tell you they are the ones experiencing unjust persecution. It's up to you to have the clarity to realize that this isn't the case, to educate yourself and develop the empathy necessary to see through these lies. You have a responsibility to understand and to care, because that is what society actually needs to progress, no matter how much people try to regress what has already been developed. You can't let your fear turn into hate. You need to beat that fear and be a better person. Being uncomfortable is okay, but you need to explore that, understand why, and try to overcome it. Redding is the second mining town we can stumble across through our journey. What Broken Hills was for uranium, Redding is for gold. If you're wondering why people would need gold in the apocalypse, it's because it is used to create their new legal tender in the form of NCR dollars. Due to the value of gold skyrocketing through the use of currency, Redding is a key location that many of the Wasteland's larger players want to have under their control. Those players would be Vault City, New Reno, and the NCR. We've only been to one of those locations so far, but as a quick breakdown, New Reno is a city full of crime and depravity run by multiple syndicates. Vault City is an isolated community of technologically advanced slavers, and the New California Republic are individuals looking to force the entirety of the wasteland into reintegrating into civilized society again, often looking to consume communities and make them part of the Republic. The NCR has its problems, which I believe are explored better in New Vegas, but I generally always saw them as the greatest good in Fallout 2, considering their want for a better world and the Rangers' desire to abolish slavery completely. So with that in mind, there are three real options as to who will annex Redding. You may ask about independence, but Madame Modjeska explains it best. Redding is a free town as of now, but they are small and surrounded by three bigger settlements. Any of those settlements could take Redding by force, but it would be costly. To have Redding join willingly would be a better solution, but things are coming to a head. If one settlement can't have Redding, they are going to make damn sure no one else can. And so subterfuge and plans are made to try and force Redding's hand. If that failed, eventually the people here would be in danger. Independence isn't an option, and it's about picking the lesser of three evils. Redding has a jet problem. Gold shipments are slowing down due to the rise of jet addiction thanks to the Mordino family in New Reno, who want to be in charge of the mining town. Meanwhile, the bishops are trying to force Vault City into an alliance with the NCR so that the NCR will leave the bishops in power as their reach extends to the crime-fueled city. Politics abound around here. Everyone wants something and they are all working to get it in their own ways, with violence never off the table. An aspect of humanity, of war, that never changes. With the slowing of gold shipments, Reading has less trading power, meaning this is further forcing them to make a decision. If Reading has to join up with someone, they would rather make that decision themselves, and there are 3 separate individuals we can talk to who all want one of the differing settlements in charge. By choosing to help one of them, they can be given the influence to drive the future of Reading in a specific direction. There's no clear-cut answer, and I like that. I would personally choose the NCR, but maybe you think they aren't up for the task. Maybe you think New Reno would allow Reading to be more free despite the crime, or maybe you think the technology of Vault City would be more beneficial to the townspeople despite the slavery. It's up to the player and thus up to you here to decide what you think is best, or to leave the town to its own devices. But this could lead to the town being torn apart by 3 different entities. So you as the player have a choice. Do you find a way to help the local doctor who is the sole Vault City resident in town, or do you help one of the 2 main mining companies? If you get the jet antidote through some means, I got it from Vault City, you can cure the addiction of the town and the townspeople will rally around Doc Johnson, looking to make him mayor. Alternatively, you can find an excavator chip and give it to one of the mining companies. I personally gave it to Marge LaBarge, as she wants to join the NCR. The best course of action in my mind is to give her the chip and cure the town anyway, although I believe curing the town and returning forces the ending where Reading joins Vault City. I never returned after that, so I got the NCR ending instead, which I think is like the best overall conclusion. Reading is enjoyable as an examination into a town left with no other options. Whittled down into almost nothing, they are losing their freedom and independence because others want what they have. Resources, the same thing that led to the Great War. No matter how good one of the options may seem, that isn't the point. The point is that humanity has managed to cause similar issues to what has destroyed them in the first place. A desire for something that isn't theirs to have, a desire for power, a desire for a future by any means necessary. Reading can survive, sure, but what it once was ends up destroyed, wiped clean like a nuclear bomb, clearing out our planet and turning it into a wasteland. See, I said it right there. Stop sending me comments. Stop it. Stop sending me comments about how I say nuclear. Nuclear, I don't care. Outside of politics, Reading is a Wild West theme park, looking to emulate those times through allowing you to become a deputy to the sheriff and deal with various issues in the mines. Like I mentioned previously, the mining outfits need an excavator chip to continue work, but you can also buy the deed to your own mine. The main issue is that it's full of Wanamingos, which are some of the tougher enemies in the game and look incredibly similar to xenomorphs from the Alien series. Legally distinct xenomorphs in Fallout 2, guys. These are some of the toughest bastards in the game. I'd put them on par with Deathclaws just due to their defense, brutality, and the sheer number of them, making them a giant threat. The Great Wanamingo mine is packed to the brim with these freaks, but if you clear them out and buy the deed, you can sell it back to the mayor of Reading for a profit. Not worth the trouble in that alone, but the experience gained is great, especially early on. Overall, despite the theme park design, Reading is a great look into the pitfalls of society as it tries to claw its way back from near extinction. Everyone has wants and desires, and those tend to conflict with others, leaving someone unhappy and potentially leading into further problems, including violence and subterfuge. War never changes because humanity tends to never change. But as Marcus has shown us, there are individuals like the Vault Dweller, the Chosen One, and even the Master, who can have lasting impacts and influence. Things may seem bad within the Wasteland, devolving back to the issues that caused the war in the first place, but that's not truly always the case. And there will always be people looking to do what's right in the smaller ways while leading to larger changes. You may not want to make your choice for Reading until you've seen all the NCR and New Reno has to offer. With that in mind, let's finally take a look at the crime-fueled city, which acts as one of the biggest hubs of content within the game. New Reno is a giant city in comparison to the other locations we visited so far, and is home to 4 major crime families who all vie for power. You have the Bishops, who I have mentioned previously. John Bishop is looking to forge an alliance with the NCR so he can be put in charge of New Reno and keep gambling, drugs, and other hedonistic aspects of the culture alive. To secure this, Bishop hired mercenaries to harass Vault City in order to force their hand in allying with the Republic as well. The Mordinos are the producers of Jet and have been using it to help influence Reading, hoping to take it over for the gold and trade power that comes alongside it. Using a nearby stables as their main lab, we'll later meet Myron, who is the key to production. The Salvatore's main thing is that they are the only family with laser weaponry, which is supplied to them from a currently unknown source. By working with them, we'll quickly be able to put together where these weapons are coming from. Outside of that, they are mostly self-sufficient and try to manipulate the other families into fighting one another. Finally, the Wrights are the only true family in town. They are all blood related. Considered the weakest of the 4 families, the Wrights control the entirety of New Reno's east side and are the main producers of alcohol within the city. As you explore New Reno, you can take part in dealings with each of the families, many of which have multiple quests for you to complete. Sometimes these quests go against another one of the families, which can make it difficult to do everything there is to do. Additionally, completing all of the quests for any specific family will have them turn you into a made man, a term for members of the Mafia who have been fully initiated into the family. Being a made man for a family in New Reno gives you a title and prevents you from interacting with the other families, again potentially locking you out of quest lines. You can find ways to manipulate this so you can do everything for everyone, but it's not really designed for that. You aren't supposed to be able to do everything in New Reno, and I'd say you aren't meant to do everything in Fallout 2 as a whole. Rather, you are supposed to find and try new things with each playthrough. That being said, we will explore a bit of each of the families to get the general idea, as many of them have interesting aspects about them. Just as Redding was a Wild West theme park, New Reno is just a theme park of depravity at a much grander scale. But there are many interesting things to do here. So many you may start to feel overwhelmed. Many quests can start in New Reno and have you leave only to return later, making it feel like the central hub of the game, an equivalent to the Strip and Freeside in Fallout New Vegas. In a PC Gamer article surrounding the history of Fallout, the author Ian Dransfield talks about the Tommy gun-toting thugs with models that don't even belong in the game. I don't think I ever felt this personally, and these aesthetics would be further featured in Fallout 3 onward, especially in 4. However, the reasoning behind the author's thoughts seems to be how Chris Avellone was just handed the sprites and forced to make use of them, despite them not having the right feel. Maybe at the time New Reno felt like it stood out, but as the series developed with games like New Vegas, New Reno feels perfectly reasonable and comfortable within the universe's wasteland. It's just funny how something that didn't feel right at the time due to a rushed development ended up being a staple aesthetic in the series. One of the things you can do here outside of the families is becoming a prize fighter at the local boxing gym. Boxing matches are a melee-centric affair. Characters with a low strength stat and unarmed skill will have a tougher time than a character that focuses on it. You won't necessarily have to miss out on this aspect of New Reno though, but it won't feel very organic if you aren't the type of character that should be taking part in it. Save scumming generally ends up being crucial here for that reason, but maybe you're just willing to lose and have that be that. You can rematch if you ask right away, but after your first loss, if you walk away, you can't continue. Prize fighting still managed to be one of my favorite aspects of New Reno, and you'll run into something similar in San Francisco later. If you manage to win the entire thing, you gain a lot of reputation with the residents of New Reno and become known as the current champion. This also allows you to take part in adult videos if you have the endurance for it, but isn't required. Well, the endurance is, but a high charisma gets you in for an audition just as well as being a prize fighter. Another event that can transpire if you have the car by this point is that you will find it has been stolen when returning to it after exiting to another screen. A child nearby can inform you where to find the car and take you there. This is T-Ray's place, and he works for the Bishops. You can fight to get the car back, pay for it, or convince him you work for Bishop and want it back for him. If you do any of these more peaceful options, he can upgrade the car for you. Female characters can sleep with him for a similar outcome. All of these little random events with the car really help the world feel as though it moves without you. Things can change as you leave and return to locations you've been to before, or events can transpire without your intentions, such as when we run into Lumpy. We have a package for the Bishops from Moore in Vault City. It's the main way of getting in with the family so you can perform missions for them. Unfortunately, Bishop's missions tend to be assassinating individuals he wants removed, so I tend to not do them. For example, he wants Weston and NCR to be killed, but you can tell this to Weston, who will then ask you to switch sides and kill Bishop instead. This is generally how I go about things since I kill most of the families anyway. Most of the families operate out of a form of bar/casino. Gambling in classic Fallout is tied to the gambling skill and increases your chances of winning. Upstairs of the Bishop's Casino is where you can find John Bishop as well as the Magic 8-Ball on the nearby pool table. The Magic 8-Ball is a joke item, but with a luck stat of 9 or higher, you can shake it to sometimes get clues to secrets within the game, such as the secret Easter egg in the basement of New Reno Arms, which is literally an Easter egg. Most of these clues are like that and relatively useless, but others can offer at least some goods that you otherwise would miss. Within the casino, you can meet Bishop's daughter and his wife and potentially sleep with either of them. Ill-advised personally, as it can lead to you potentially getting addicted to Jet or attacked, but it is an option and can let you steal some decent items early on. Canonically, the Chosen One has a child with either the wife or the daughter, and that child grows up to take over the family. The bishops aren't really anything special. Like the other families, they are cutthroat and quick to anger. Helping them makes them like you enough to have you become a made man, but I don't like them as potential leaders of New Reno. The Salvatores similarly don't offer too much in terms of excitement or interest, but they at least get us close to the Enclave for a moment. I mentioned this earlier, but we actually first ran into them through a forced encounter where we watched Frank Horrigan blow up a family of farmers for unknown reasons that are truly unknown, even with the Fallout Bible only having speculation. Frank is meant to be periodically run into or seen because the developers wanted a more present antagonist for the player to chase after. While we definitely see Frank more than the Master, he's barely interactable and most of your opportunities to witness his actions are easily missed. You can see his involvement with an issue surrounding Vault 13 and the Brotherhood of Steel potentially, but there's a very real chance you'll never ever run into these. The real appeal isn't Frank specifically, but more the mystery of the Enclave as a whole. While helping the Salvatores, one of the missions you get sent on is to guard a trade between the Enclave and the family, where they are trading laser weaponry for chemicals. This deal is what gives the Salvatores such an edge in terms of weaponry and alludes to what the Enclave's plans are for the future. Next we have the Mordinos. In my mind, the Wrights and the Mordinos are the most interesting of the two families. The main reason for that is that the Mordinos produce the jet that has been getting everyone addicted. Like Redding, New Reno also has an awful jet problem, with it flooding the streets and everyone becoming addicted to it. By working for the Mordinos, we can find the stables where they create the product. If you talk your way past a scientist to get further into the stables with security clearance, you can meet the creator of Jet named Myron. People always complain about Lynette, but I think Myron is absolutely one of the worst characters you can run into within the Wasteland. Myron is the creator of Jet, or at least was at the time of this game's release. Through future releases, including all of Fallout 3, New Vegas, and 4, Jet has been placed in locations that it couldn't have been in if it was truly created before the Great War. Many people got very pressed about this during Fallout 4, but even New Vegas had Jet in locations such as the Big Empty from the Old World Blues DLC. People like to lambast Bethesda for retcons and the like, but this never seemed to be a problem for any of the developers or story writers, including those who worked on Fallout 2. Due to the self-admitted mistake by Chris Avallone, Myron's age doesn't even line up with the production of Jet, as Mr. Bishop got his wife addicted to it before Myron would have been able to create it. This seems to have been run retroactively to explain that Myron lied about its creation, yet he still seemed to be able to optimize the process, which allows the Mordinos to use him. People will complain about inconsistencies in modern Fallout games like retcons or the end of the world, but they happen all the time. If you really care about mistakes in your Fallout lore, maybe you should care more about the mistakes in the classic Fallout games themselves, because they are the progenitor of the changes you see in the future. However, at the time of writing the Fallout Bible, Chris does confirm this mistake and suggests ignoring the inconsistencies with the bishops, chalking it up to them using too much Jet to be able to properly recollect anything. Despite this, moving forward, there would be the retcons I mentioned, and that's fine in my opinion. Myron's a horny little freak 19-year-old who uses his leverage with the Mordinos to get whatever he wants, including women. He will even try to drug a female player character if her intelligence is less than 4. He will assault your character depending on your endurance score, acting as an example of how vile and lecherous this little rat is. An egotistical prick who sees himself as God, Myron is in fact a genius when it comes to chemical production. His work with Jet and hallucinogenics has examples and evidence to back them up. What he does works, and he's managed to let that get to his head. The worst part of Myron in my mind is that he's a sex pest. I can't stand his pasty little face with his nasally voice like he has something stuck in the back of his throat. I mean, I think I sound like that too, but he has other things that are very bad about him. He's designed to be disgusting, both visually and through his personality. A sexual assailant and a bigot, Myron treats anyone he sees lesser than him as an object, including tribals, slaves, and mutants. What's crazy is that he can be a companion for the character, albeit not a particularly effective one due to low combat stats. Additionally, he is one of the options for finding a cure for Jet if you convince him to make it. I never use Myron, but he's there for evil characters when other companions don't want to join you. The cherry on top is that no matter what, he ironically gets stabbed by a Jet addict after the defeat of the Enclave. Good. I hate that kid. If you accept him into your party and try to leave him anywhere, he will actively beg you to keep him. This actually has him offer to show you a secret stash belonging to the Mordinos, which can be found in Golgotha, a giant graveyard just outside of town. The stash doesn't show up unless he shows it to you, but it's not really worth going out of your way for, just a cool detail. The Wrights, the weakest of the four families, also tend to have the most interesting missions for you, the first of which is finding out who killed one of their sons. Richard Wright of the Wright family died of a jet overdose. Orville, the father and leader of the Wright family, believes the jet was forced on his son, and trying to persuade him that his son may just do drugs can lead to the Wrights turning on you. It's a balancing act and an investigation. You need to find proof of what has happened to Richard so that you can present it to Orville without him losing it on you. Orville gives you some suspects to look into, such as jet dealers, and asking around can get you a little information, but not much. You can then accuse one of them, but the quest only feels half complete if you go about it this way. Kinda like what was happening with the Skags. In reality, there's much more to it, and if you do some good detective work and ask beyond who is suggested to you, you can find out what really happened. By asking which room is Richard's, you can search a bookcase to find a hidden empty jet canister. This only showed up for me after I asked which room was Richard's, which I despise. I much prefer the freedom of investigation where you can find things on your own because they should always be there. However, the quest instead requires you to trigger a flag so that the canister now shows up. It's just unnecessarily limiting. But I'm sure there was a reason for it being like this, potentially due to how the quests are structured. Doesn't make it any less lame though, but it is what it is. You can ask around about the canister, and a jet pusher named Jagged Jimmy J will point you to the Dr. Renesco, who you can then ask about the canister. Renesco will inform us that the Salvatores asked to have a sample of jet poisoned. To accomplish this, Renesco used rad scorpion venom. Thus, Richard Wright bought some jet, despite what his father believes, and it was poisoned. The goal being that the Salvatores hoped the Wrights would blame the Mordinos, leading to a gang war. If you bring this information back to Orville, he will finally understand what his son was up to. You can mention that Renesco didn't know what the poison jet was for, but he doesn't seem to care much, most likely planning on killing the man. Knowing the plot of the Salvatores, he then has a new job for us, finding a way into the Sierra Army Depot. The depot, much like the Raider Caves, is a particularly difficult area depending on how you handle it. The main issue is the turrets that are set up outside of the base, which can absolutely slaughter you if given the opportunity. This would be easier later on when you're stronger, but it isn't the end of the world. The easiest way to get inside for me was to pick off the turrets at a range that they couldn't reach me easily or at all. But this is slow and feels a bit power gamey. If you want to go in through the front door, you can use an old howitzer after finding the shell to blast off the main entrance. If you're careful while you're inside, you'll never have any real issues with the boatload of robots that are found here. However, you may need to kill some in order to complete a small quest that unlocks a new companion for you, Skynet. A reference to the Terminator films, Skynet is an artificial intelligence that is trapped within the depot. By finding it and getting the required parts for it, you can put together a body and transfer the AI's data so Skynet can walk around freely, unlocking a new robot companion for you that I found lackluster and never really used. All Skynet is here for is to be a reference to Terminator. He offers no real value outside of that aside from being another companion, and since companions are generally one-dimensional in terms of development, there's nothing it offers in comparison to some of the better companions out there. Human characters can wear power armor, so they generally tend to be better overall, but I still like characters such as Marcus because at least he offers something within the story and is a big, tanky, heavy weapons expert, as well as being proficient in large energy weapons. Skynet meanwhile uses basic weapons while having the same combat armor statistics as Marcus without the higher firepower. Skynet can use a Gauss rifle eventually, but this doesn't really make up for his otherwise lackluster performance in my eyes. He's a gimmick character designed to exist solely as a reference, and that's boring. He's a boring little guy. I do think the creation of his body is a fun questline though, and one that rewards having a high science skill. Mainly your science skill will determine which brains you will potentially have access to. It's easy to acquire either the abnormal or chimpanzee brains, but these come with downsides. The abnormal brain makes the companion unable to really do anything except carry equipment. Meanwhile, the chimpanzee brain is the same, although it listens to you a little bit better. The human brain, the third brain, limits what weapons Skynet can be proficient in. So to even make the most out of this robot, you need a science skill of around 125% just to have a chance at getting the cybernetic brain. This allows the robot to be fully functional. He's just not worth the trouble or investment. There's multiple items to find within the depot outside of Skynet, and I always enjoy the more security-heavy sections because they feel like more active dungeons to explore. Getting through force fields is cool, albeit not very clear, and using literal eyes you find around to get past scanners was very odd, but appreciated. It's just nice when things are interactable more than being purely a combat zone. You even find the yellow memory module here, which we can make use of later in San Francisco. When you return to the rights with news of making it into the depot, Orville will make you a made man on the spot. I chose not to return to them because I thought this would stop them from acquiring the weapons, but that didn't seem to be the case. Regardless, the rights ended up being the most interesting for me and were generally who I could see running the town if given the option. Each family has their downsides, but the rights were the least conniving of the bunch, didn't work with the Enclave, and didn't push Jet. From a meta outlook, this also turns out to be the canon ending for New Vegas. The issue is that there are two ways that the rights can seize control of New Reno. If you kill the heads of the other three families and haven't done much else for the rights, they can take over and build schools and churches, attempting to shift the focus of the city from crime and drugs to something more civilized. However, if you enter the Sierra Army Depot, the rights get their hands on equipment that leads to a battle that demolishes half the city. The rights still come out on top, but only after a wave of destruction. Personally, this is the ending I usually get, as I am not going to skip out on visiting the depot just so the rights do things more peacefully. I like to think that they still rebuilt and created a better society, since they are thought of as the founders of New Reno moving forward. Additionally, I enjoy that you can inform Mrs. Wright that her husband has been lying to her and running a distillery. She believed everything her husband was doing to be above board, and she will actually meet you near the local church and ask you to destroy it for her, which doesn't seem to affect anything. I like to think that doing so helps the rights clean up their act, but that's just headcanon. Overall, I'd imagine that none of the families are a great option just looking at them. One may believe that wiping out each of them would be the best. Unfortunately, you learn that without leadership, the town falls apart. Someone needs to be in charge. So the game shows you at the end that sometimes what is best in the short term may not be best in the long term. People have similar reservations of kicking out the NCR and Legion, killing Mr. House, to create a free New Vegas as an example, due to the level of anarchy that transpires for some time after. I personally like that ending, but that's due to seeing my career as stepping up to make things work. Unfortunately, the ending of New Reno is pretty cut and dry, and the chosen one doesn't seem to stick around to help out. There's a lot to do and find in New Reno, more than I am going to go into in this video, as I believe the main focus should be on the families. I will say, New Reno Arms is definitely worth exploring. If you kill the owner and get into the basement, there is a man there that can upgrade any of your weapons for free, which is huge, especially for late game items. While the amount to do in the town can feel overwhelming, and while it may have felt out of place at the time of release, the amount of work put into it to make it feel dense and alive cannot be understated. New Reno feels like the central hub of the wasteland despite the NCR's desire to grow and expand. There's so much to do here, and so many reasons to leave and explore only to come back. It starts to feel like home after a while, and really stands as one of the best areas in the game due to all the struggles between the families and all there is to do. Prize fighting is novel, becoming an adult film star is silly, and all the gambling, drugs, and violence really make you think you're in a true scumbag town where there's danger around every corner. I love it, and I think it and Vault City really managed to stand out as some of the most content-rich locations within the entirety of the game. Even the NCR barely manages to compare, as we are going to see now. The NCR is another prospering town with more greenery than you would expect to see in the wasteland, although you wouldn't realize that immediately. Instead, we start just outside of the town. Here we can talk to Ratch, who is willing to install a blower onto our car to give it more power, making for faster traversal on the world map. NCR as a whole is probably one of the most civilized towns in Fallout 2. They don't allow you to have weapons out, have dedicated law enforcement, and do not condone slavery. There's still issues, of course, both with corrupt cops and slavers just outside of town, which can be explored as soon as you arrive. However, in the town proper, you can meet with the NCR Rangers, one of the most effective military forces of the NCR, and volunteers to boot. During the events of Fallout 2, the Rangers' specific focus is on abolishing slavery wherever they can. You can even join them, but to trust you, they task you with destroying the slave camp just outside of town and freeing everyone that's being held there. While the Rangers are mostly just flavor, joining them does increase your reputation within the NCR, and somewhat throughout the wasteland. Slavers won't like you very much, but who cares about them? While minor, the Rangers would be further developed into one of the most important parts of the NCR military, evolving them into a dedicated force for good within the wasteland. Later, around the time of New Vegas, they would unify with the Desert Rangers Vigilante Group and become one of the most deadly tools in the NCR army. The Desert Rangers have the best armor in any Fallout game, by the way, and the faction, as well as the description of their armor, hails all the way back to Fallout 1, where a companion named Tycho describes it to us, as Joshua Sawyer confirmed on his old FromSpring account when he used to spend dedicated time answering questions about New Vegas. There's a decent amount of things to do in NCR, but just like New Reno, I won't be going over all of them. Just some key aspects of the town that I think are worth knowing about, such as how you have to holster all your weapons. I mentioned this earlier, but if you head into downtown NCR with your weapon drawn, you have maybe 5 seconds to get everyone to put them away before the cops turn hostile on you. It's an understandable thing from a role-playing aspect, but man is it handled poor mechanically, as getting each party member to put their weapons away requires individual interaction and takes time, meaning you can be sort of doomed, especially if you just spawn in there on return visits and forget to do this. This will also probably be your first interaction with the Hubologists, as they have a spokesperson here in town you can talk to. Hubology will be explored a bit more when we reach San Francisco, but it's essentially just a blatant riff on Scientology, and was kind of surprising to think they had something like this so long ago. Scientology has only grown in notoriety as the years have passed, and now we got kids breaking into churches to find all of their alien secrets so that they can post them on TikTok for the bit. But back then, in 1998, I don't know how much you would have really heard about it. Clearly enough, as it gets referenced here, but the biggest blow up for Scientology in the mainstream, to my knowledge, was in 2005 when Tom Cruise jumped on Oprah's couch and South Park made an episode focusing on the religion. The Hubologists here can perform a Zeta scan on you, which can either raise your luck by 2 or lower it by 1. You can check and save scum for this if you want, but it's basically a free means of maxing out your luck if you care about that. Not a huge deal, but it helps. They can make you an AHS-1, which is a rank in the cult, and can theoretically be raised to AHS-9 as we meet someone with that rank later. They'll also ask you to deliver a field report to San Francisco, without marking it on your map, I'm pretty sure. There's a doctor in town that wants you to test a mutagenic serum on a super mutant. It'll basically melt the mutant out of existence, and the reward is a new Robodog companion, which I didn't bother with. There are no normal super mutants that I would want to use the serum on, and all the hostile ones ended up in combat with me before I could think to administer it, so I never bothered. Still, this is another companion to unlock if you want it. If you played New Vegas, this doctor is actually Doc Henry, formerly of the Enclave. Henry doesn't talk about it much here, but you can learn about his involvement slightly by talking to a slave overseer. The overseer heard Henry talking about the Enclave when drunk one night. Despite hiding this aspect of his life, Henry is currently working on attempting to help humanity by finding a cure for the super mutants, although it obviously doesn't work as intended. He'd later move to Jacob's Town, which Marcus founded, in order to help the Nightkin there. His experience with Robodogs is also referenced, as we need his help in fixing wrecks for the King in Freeside. Weston, a well-off individual in town, is also worth visiting. He's one of the individuals Bishop wants us to assassinate, and we can also act as a messenger between him and Lynette, leading to becoming captain of the guard in Vault City. More importantly, Weston has a job for us to protect his Brahmin cattle from being attacked at night. If we guard the cattle, we will have our first run-in with intelligent, English-speaking Deathclaws. They won't attack, as they have been ordered not to harm humans, and we can inform Weston that he just needs to keep guards stationed out there to prevent any further issues. Talking Deathclaws are a sore spot even for the developers. I mentioned earlier that Chris Avellone would later regret their inclusion in the game. He would confirm in the Fallout Bible that they did not survive after the events of Fallout 2 as a means of removing them from the series entirely. I don't know why he gets to be the authority on that. Tim and Leonard had similar feelings with the approachability of the Deathclaws, as they were supposed to be threatening monsters. But John Daly and Fergus supported the idea of talking Deathclaws, citing super mutants and ghouls as potentially being equally as silly, and I agree. We can befriend super mutants in Fallout 2, so why not Deathclaws? Both were giant hulking monsters and enemies in the first game, but now we have developed super mutants into something more. Why is it so silly for the same thing to happen to Deathclaws? John, the creator of the talking creatures, actually seemed pretty bitter over it in a 2024 interview with The Gamer, lamenting over Chris calling them too silly in a game with brains in jars and sentient toasters. Get his ass, John. This interview is actually a crazy look into what working with Chris Avellone was like, often considered an authority on Fallout lore as a whole, and idolized by the community. Chris seemed to be a problem for some of the other developers. Daly would mention that trying to stand up for yourself over an idea that Chris didn't like was a career-ending affair, which is a horribly scary concept within the game development world, especially today. Let me read an excerpt from this interview real quick. I ask where the tension between him and Avalon came from, and Daly recounts a time when working with Josh Sawyer at Interplay. He had designed a final boss that fed on people's nightmares, a lot like what we'd later see in the Vermina quest in Skyrim, and Avalon allegedly demanded that it be removed. Sawyer stepped in and he said, "No, this is the perfect monster, I'm going to back him up 100%. From that day forward, Avalon was just, "I don't like you. I work with you because I'm forced to work with you." He was pretty much the same with Josh, Daly says. Brother, what? This is your guy's man? The authority on Fallout lore and canon with his Fallout Bible? How can we even take that seriously? The Bible hasn't been canon since 2011, to Avalon's own admission, and despite referencing it, Emil Pagliarulo explained how they grabbed their canon first and foremost from the games, not from resources online from one guy. So many people lament over the Talking Death Clause and still use this Bible to this day. I even reference it for this video as it was more relevant to the classic games, but man, talk about an outdated document potentially driven by the idea that you are the authority on what is and isn't valid in comparison to the other developers. The way some people talk about how silly Fallout has become, as if it hasn't always been like that, is ridiculous to me. There's limits and nuance to be sure, but Fallout has always been like this, has always had these elements and problems. Talking Deathclaw drama aside, Daly was the one who worked on the NCR location and Vault 13, and both of these locations have interesting lore drops and missions to do despite the hiccups. We can run into Tandy for some work as well. Tandy is the daughter of Aradesh, who was the last elder of Shady Sands, and would work to found the NCR after the arrival and help of the Vault Dweller in Fallout 1. He would die searching for Vault 13, as Tandy can inform us. After the death of her father, Tandy would be elected the new president of the NCR and currently holds that position when we visit. If you let Tandy know you are the descendant of the Vault Dweller, she seems to believe you and will talk to you about how they saved her life back in Fallout 1 after she got captured by the Raiders. They even have a statue of the Vault Dweller within the Republic. The NCR needs some parts from Vault 15, but apparently some squatters have taken it over and are unwilling to communicate with the Republic. She'd like us to go there and try and convince them to work together. It seems they are getting to the point where they don't care how they get the parts, but peacefully would be the best option. Vault 15 will be where we find the location of Vault 13, which is necessary for it to appear on the world map at all. It isn't completely necessary, however. There's a man named Saltbeef in NCR who will inform you about a map to Vault 13 he scribbled on the back of a painting. Asking Dr. Jubilee about this painting will have him offer to sell it for $10,000. By purchasing it, you can get the location of 13 without ever going to Vault 15. I recommend just heading to the Squatter Vault anyway, as it's content to complete and worthwhile. One final note is that there is another Brotherhood outpost here, and once again, they seem to be keeping tabs on you. Again, they can answer a few questions for you, but they're not super useful. Vault 15 is currently occupied by a settlement of squatters. However, the squatters don't seem to have access into the vault either, as Tandy mentions. The reason for this is that the squatters believe an individual named Darien is attempting to fix the vault for them. Darien's group provides resources for the settlers, which they claim come from the vault, but they also claim it isn't habitable just yet. The daughter of one of these settlers, named Chrissy, is kidnapped by Darien's group after finding a secret entrance. She further learns that this is a re-established group of raiders known as the Khans from the first game, and they are simply using the squatters to unknowingly defend their new base of operations. If we save Chrissy from being kidnapped and almost assaulted, we can bring this information to the squatters and they will ask us to kill the Khans for them. By wiping the Khans out, you can gain access to the vault properly and convince the settlement to join up with the NCR. What's crazy is that the computer within Vault 15 has the location of Vault 13 within it. Aradesh died searching for something despite the information being so close. Regardless of how you get the location of Vault 13, we can finally make our way over there, while also informing Tandy that they have access to 15 now. Within 15, you can also learn there is a trader in the NCR named Fergus, again named after the designer at Black Isle. With 13 now within arm's reach, we can finally head there, meet some Talking Deathclaws, and finish up what we can call the first act of Fallout 2. This is Gruthar, the alpha or leader of the Deathclaw pack. His son, Goris, is also a potential companion we can pick up, and I generally choose to. After the departure of the Vault Dweller and several deserters, the Overseer was replaced with an automated mainframe by the Brotherhood of Steel. Eventually, the Enclave showed up and tricked the system into giving the all clear message, informing the Dwellers it was finally time to leave. However, this was a trap, and the Enclave murdered multiple Dwellers on the spot as soon as the doors opened, and then kidnapped the remainder. This is the opening scene we see on the main menu screen when we first start up the game. During this, the Enclave deployed intelligent Deathclaws into the vault, but they turned against their handlers and established a community here for both mutated creatures and humans. Gruthar, feeling guilt for the involvement of his species in this act, looks to atone by keeping people within the vault safe. With that in mind, they are wary of newcomers, and you need to show in some way that you aren't a threat. Usually good karma is enough for this, however getting the Gecko from Vault 13, which Gruthar is willing to look for, requires a bit more work. To prove yourself to the vault, Gruthar wants you to fix the voice module on their mainframe so that they can restore automated functionality to the vault. This module is found in Vault 8 of Vault City, or can be purchased in New Reno. When you finally fix the computer, Gruthar holds up his end of the bargain and finally bestows upon you the Holy Gecko so that you may bring it back to Arroyo and finally save your people from this drought. Gruthar and his pack have a good thing here, but it isn't easy. You can find their hatchery and talk to the current pack mother Kareth to learn that someone once tried to blow it up. Kareth managed to catch it in time and save the hatchery, but the door to it was blown apart in the process. Like in Broken Hills, some humans are disturbed and distrusting of mutants and mutated creatures. Even here in a brand new community, there is hate and bigotry most likely tied to the Deathclaw's involvement in the kidnapping of Vault 13 residents. Unfortunately, thanks to Chris Avalone, the Deathclaws are doomed. After we leave Vault 13, if we return later, they will have been killed by Frank Horrigan and the Enclave. Goris, Gruthar's son, will be the only survivor and will inform us of what happened by pointing us to a security console that shows us camera footage of the event taking place. In cut content, or through a scripting error, as some seem to say online, you were originally able to save the Deathclaws, but I believe this was removed for the reasons stated in the interview with John Daly. I like Goris and I like taking him along with me. It feels fitting as he wants revenge for his family. He's also a scholar and wants to see the world. I like to think he had a good life after the events of Fallout 2, despite whatever, Avalone wanted. When we leave the vault with the Gecko, Hakunen will call us on our dream telephone. When we finally arrive back at our home village, we see the bridge destroyed and Hakunen dying on the ground in front of us. He explains that the Shadow of Darkness arrived and dark souls took everything. The villagers, not understanding what was happening, believed the Enclave to be their salvation, only to be gunned down with laser weaponry and many of them kidnapped. Taken away to an unknown location, although Hakunen explains they headed south towards a location known as Navarro before crossing the sea. This sets up the second, albeit shorter Act 2 of Fallout 2, where we must now find and rescue the villagers of Arroyo from the hands of the Enclave, now placing the organization front and center as our main antagonists. The Gecko is seemingly useless to us, although holding onto it is beneficial for a time, but unnecessary as we can find another later. Much like the Master's army, the Enclave leaves a wave of destruction in their wake, kidnapping all they deem necessary for whatever it is they have planned. In terms of this, they are almost a mirror image to the mutants at this point, which is funny considering their view on mutated individuals, as we will learn later. To continue our adventure, we must heed Hakunen's words and head south to find Navarro, but before that, Goris can explain to you back at Vault 13 that the Enclave were interested in a military base found west of the location. We can briefly check that out now, as it is the original military base that we needed to destroy in Fallout 1 in order to stop the Master. Mariposa military base is a shell of its former self, but it's mostly accurate to how it was in Fallout 1 with minor changes. You need to solve a small puzzle to get in where you stick dynamite to a cart and shove it towards the door. The Enclave, finding out about the base, looked to obtain a sample of the FEV virus. However, the slaves used to do the job mutated due to FEV exposure. Becoming super mutants without even being dipped in the vats of FEV, they staged a coup and drove the Enclave out of the base. Mariposa is really just another combat dungeon to work your way through, finding dead Enclave soldiers and learning what happened as you battle through countless super mutants, eventually meeting Melchior, a resident of Redding, and a magician. You can meet his son, Melchior Jr., back in the mining town. This dude uses magic to summon a variety of pets he collected while at the base, including Deathclaws, making it a pretty intense fight. Maybe it's just sleight of hand, right? Maybe it's not actually magic, but you're telling me that's okay, while talking Deathclaws were too silly. Right. The fight can get so overwhelming that I generally tend to just kill Melchior before he even has an opportunity to summon anything, which is pretty easy at this point, especially if you grab the power armor here, and this is probably the first real opportunity of getting any. It's a difficult but rewarding location and will help prepare you for what is to come. I believe around now was when I started cleaning some things up, like going back to the toxic caves to finally enter the storage area there. Not much in there though for this point in the game, unfortunately. You can get the location of San Francisco by finding a survey map in the military base, and it's the closest new location to explore from the base, so I like to head there next. You can't get into Navarro easily at this point anyway, but you can always try. I don't know what was going on in their minds when creating San Francisco. It is one of the larger but more empty locations in the game and is populated predominantly by racist characters of Chinese individuals, focusing heavily on martial arts and technology. There's a whole side quest similar to prize fighting where you have to enter a martial arts tournament and kill one of the two heads of competing dojos in hand-to-hand combat, man. While the city is predominantly Chinese, it feels like their culture is used more for content or the butt of a joke more often than not. All of the Chinese people are tied to martial arts or the Shi, who have an emperor that they revere, who turns out to be a computer. Their entire identity as people seems completely tied to the fact that they are Asian, and perpetuates some weird ideas about how Asian culture is dominant in San Francisco. The individuals here call you round eyes, they say shit like work, 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 rice, rice, rice. Martial arts combatants will shout chop socky, which is a term for Hong Kong martial arts films, which doesn't even make sense since Fallout is based on being stuck in the 50s and these movies were made between the 60s and 80s. I'm not giving them the benefit of the doubt here. They just wanted the Chinese characters to say something that sounded vaguely Chinese. This isn't even a term they created but was coined by Americans. It's one thing for there to be racist propaganda in a game where Americans try to vilify the Chinese and communism. It's another for the devs to actually make the Chinese racist caricatures, especially when the shit they have them say doesn't even make sense in the context of the game. It's the most generationally lazy racism you're gonna see come out of Fallout. There are 4 main things we can do within San Francisco. One is meeting with the Brotherhood of Steel operative at their outpost here, since they will finally have a job for us. Specifically, they want us to steal vertebrate plans from Navarro and return them. By doing so, we can enter into the outpost and use a computer to increase specific special stats, assuming we have the modules to do so. There are memory modules for strength, perception, intelligence, and charisma. Each is free to install but requires weeks of time passing. They can be found throughout the wasteland, with one found in Vault City, the military base, the army depot, and Navarro respectively. After delivering the vertebrate plans to the Brotherhood and entering the outpost, if you return, you will notice that the guard is gone. A security monitor inside shows a similar situation to Vault 13, with Frank Horrigan showing up to kill the knight. While you can deliver the vertebrate plans to the Brotherhood, they are not the only ones that want them. And while I believe you can keep them after delivering them to the Brotherhood specifically, so you can hand them to one of the other 2 major groups, I don't find this necessarily worthwhile. We do have 3 other factions in San Francisco to talk about though, all vying for something in some capacity. The main sect of the Hubologists can be found here. If you want to join them to get inside their base, you need to go through a Zeta scan if you haven't already back in the NCR. When you walk inside, you have to watch a whole song and dance making fun of Scientology. 2 celebrities are endorsing the cults to the crowd, with the game attempting to show the absurdity of listening to someone and giving them money just because they're famous. It works, but it isn't any less ridiculous. The commentary is just so uninspired and boring too. Hi, we are celebrities, you should trust us, we are good. Great one, guys. Riveting stuff, amazing writing. The Hubologists wanted everyone to worship them. Through that, they are at odds with the Shi and the Tanker, often asking you to assassinate individuals so that they have more power and control. Meanwhile, the Shi take issue with what the Hubologists are trying to do since they are, a cult and want to destroy them. So those 2 main factions are at odds, and the Tanker is sort of in the middle of that, as it is full of punks and vagrants looking to just live a free life. The Hubologist leaders, looking for wealth and power, look to strip that from the others for their own gains. Both the Hubologist and the Tanker need fuel for one reason or another. The Hubologists want to fuel their spaceship, they hope to use to travel the stars, and the Tanker needs it to become operational. We can learn through our time here and Navarro that the Enclave has taken our people to an oil rig off the coast, so we'll need the Tanker working to get over there. There's a few ways to get fuel. Several quests can be completed in order for the Shi to provide it for you, but you can just get access to their Emperor, a supercomputer, and direct the oil there yourself without any extra legwork. Most of these quests overlap with one another or are just meant to be at odds between the Shi and the Hubologists. One guy wants hardened power armor for the fuel, and the Hubologists can make it. Get it for him. The Shi want the vertebrate plans, the Hubologists want the plans too. Give them to one of them, and then maybe steal it back for the other faction. What's nice is that you have options of who you help and how you shape San Francisco for better or worse. Despite the racist caricatures, the Shi seem like a good, technologically advanced community. They want the best for their people and deplore the acts of those that look to manipulate them. They don't mess with the taker vagrants, they just want people to be safe and not manipulated. So I don't ever side with the Hubologists in anything, but I also didn't take to wiping them out. Instead, I just left them to their devices so that they could fail. If you leave the Shi alone and let them live their lives, they end up flourishing in San Francisco, which is the best outcome in my mind. By the way, no matter what you do for the Hubologists, they will die in various catastrophic ways, such as an explosion with their shuttle or running out of air, assuming they manage to launch it. These guys are so stupid and suck so hard, and they are just as dumb in Fallout 4, albeit more comically so. San Francisco's content is just as silly as anything else within the Wasteland. It's the racism that really throws it over the edge for me in being one of the worst locations in the game. Add into that the empty feeling of the area, and it just feels like a rushed inclusion meant to be there to check off a box. Just north of the main area, between the tanker and the city proper, is a big empty section with nothing to do. In fact, San Francisco in general and many maps are emptier than you'd expect them to be. Which is funny because the game feels too big for its own good. Making everything so large was to the game's detriment overall. They should have just made it smaller and more compact like the original so that these areas could feel denser and more fleshed out. But as we have seen in the development history section, this just wasn't in the cards. Colin McComb, who designed San Francisco, even confirmed it was rushed in a developer profile found on No Mutants Allowed. Don't ask my opinions on that site though. Finally, we have the tanker, our main means of reaching the Enclave. Populated by various vagrants, all looking for a sense of community and to be free, they are not a major player in any of the Wasteland politics. Actually, in that sense, neither is San Francisco, which feels completely detached from anything else in the Wasteland for no real reason. You'd imagine such a large civilization with all of this technology to at least be brought up more, or for other individuals to be vying for its power, but no. You can get in good with the vagrant's hacker, Badger, by saving his girlfriend from below deck where there are some mutants and Wanamingos. By doing so, he can hack into the Emperor for you to get the fuel, but again, this is unnecessary. I like to save her anyway for the experience, however. Talking to the captain, you can learn that besides fuel, the tanker needs NavComp parts that can be found in Vault 13. You also need a tanker fob to access the computer to install the parts, and these can only be found in Navarro, meaning you have to go there regardless if you want to complete the game. This isn't necessarily true, as I mentioned way earlier, that stupid characters can get the help of the Hubologist for fixing the tanker, but that's a special case most players won't see or find. We're so close to the end, but before we can reach it, we have just one final area to explore, Navarro. Navarro is the main Enclave base found on land in California, but you wouldn't realize that upon showing up initially. Chris here claims to be running a service station, but thanks to the Brotherhood of Steel operative, we know what's really going on, and can speech check our way through by claiming we want to join up with the Enclave. You can force your way in or use a keycard to sneak in if you'd rather, but this was the best option for me. Additionally, I believe you can bring your companions along, but considering how they feel about mutated life, I decided to leave everyone behind. Navarro is pretty straightforward, but there is still a bit of extra fluff to do here. The main reason we are here is twofold. 1, the vertebrate plans, and 2, the tanker fob. To find these objects, you can ask around, but need to be careful with what you say as to not give yourself away to anyone suspicious of you. Getting the vertebrate plans is easy enough. I chose to start a feud between 2 mechanics so that one would knock out the other, allowing me to grab them without any witnesses, but you can also convince the individual guarding them to hand them to you, or you can sneak to get them without anyone noticing. I like the fight personally, it felt more lively. Next we need the tanker fob, which is underground in the main base. Here we can find a suit of power armor so that we look more like an Enclave soldier. It's also more effective, but any power armor generally has the Enclave believing you are one of them. Down here we can meet Dr. Schreiber and K9. Schreiber is an evil little man and head of the research project that gave us talking Deathclaws. Realizing that they may have become a bit too intelligent, he brought one of the Deathclaws here for study and confirmed that they needed to be wiped out. He also created a robo-dog with enhanced intellect named K9. After biting Schreiber, the doctor removed his motivator circuit, making it impossible for the dog to move. He also conducts countless experiments on living subjects to the point that the room had to be soundproofed. Good for us, because it means we can kill him without any repercussions. If you're feeling particularly nice, you can free the Deathclaw, technically making him one of the only talking ones left in the Wasteland alongside Gorus. You can also fix K9 by getting his motivator circuit, and he'll join you as a companion. By this point I had the charisma boost, so I ended up having an extra companion slot, making adding him to the team easy. So we had Goris, Marcus, K9, and Cassidy by the end. Cassidy may be the only other human on our team, but he's highly effective in combat. I loved keeping him around. Trieber was supposed to be the reason that the Deathclaws get attacked at Vault 13. It's explained online that you would have been able to save them by getting rid of him before the Enclave moves in on the Vault, and that it is a scripting error that prevents this ending from being possible. Finally, we can head to the commander's office to find the tanker fob, but it's guarded and the officer will inform us that no one gets in without permission except for the cleaning crew. If we talk to him again immediately and explain that we are the cleaning crew, we get a funny dialogue where he points out how absurd of a lie that is considering he just told us about them. A speech check can still get us through, however, and we can convince them to just hand the fob to us. Like I said, Navarro is fairly straightforward and there isn't much to do here. However, the rewards are nice, since we can get the new power armor and some high-tier energy weapons. Now that we have everything we need, it's time to head back to San Francisco and start the tanker, allowing us to get to the oil rig and giving the Vagrants a mobile base of operations. Heading back to the tanker, we can talk to Aaron Myers to learn a bit more about where we are headed. A punk now, Myers used to be a member of the Enclave, but turned on them and left the organization when he realized he wasn't fighting for America, but for the rich and powerful who didn't want to lose their authority in the New World. That's a great explanation of the people we are about to deal with. Once you are ready to take off and activate the tanker, you get a really neat FMV of watching it head towards the oil rig. The Enclave base is the last location we will be exploring in this video, and is the point of no return in this storyline. Here we will finally be able to save our village, as well as deal with the Enclave once and for all. You can really get a feel for how conceited the Enclave is going to be once you arrive. Even the pipes have the faces of man molded onto them. Humanity above all, but only a very specific subset of humanity. The rig is a convoluted area to say the least, but you can walk around the entire thing freely if you're sporting a suit of power armor. There's even a Mark II variant of the advanced set to grab while here, which is great for Frank Horrigan later. I've seen online that you should be able to get some companions through here with you, but I could never get it to work. Everyone attacked me, even if it was just one human companion with power armor on, so who knows if that's true or not. Let me know in the comments if you ever figured that out, please. Essentially, once walking into the main entrance, I leave my companions by the door and then explore freely on my own. On the first explorable floor, we can find the citizens from Vault 13 as well as the villagers from Arroyo, including the Elder. They are all trapped in cells behind energy barriers that we can't bypass at the moment. The Elder will explain to us that the Enclave seems to be experimenting on outsiders with a form of FEV that, when injected, causes them to melt and boil both internally and externally. The Elder will mention that the lucky ones choke on their own blood and die before it can get worse. Basically some comically evil shit right there. She tells us to destroy a machine beneath the floor that feeds the electricity above. By doing so, they can all escape onto the tanker. Unfortunately, for the base of operations of the Enclave, there isn't much to do or explore here. Most areas have tons of NPCs that you can't interact with, and containers that are usually but not always empty. So it's one big, empty, confusing location to explore just to get to your goal. The real sin is the weird puzzle room you come across. Here you will find several doors in a 3x3 grid pattern. Activating the terminal of one can open and close other doors around it. Once you figure out which terminals affect what doors, you can use various patterns to get your way to the end. However, this is particularly annoying because it can take a while to figure this out, all while you are periodically being electrocuted by the floor for whatever reason. There are some cables at the bottom room on the far right, and you can interact with them using a tool to shut down this aspect of the puzzle room, the electricity. How you would have figured that out on your own, I'll never know. To make matters worse, I believe the doors a console opens and the ones it closes are different, which is absolutely insane to me. To make matters worse, somehow, you need the Gecko in your inventory to get through the final door. If for some reason you don't have it, you can't progress, and so you may feel trapped. Luckily, there's an extra one to be found in one of the side rooms, but then you have to use the consoles to reach those too, and this is what torture feels like. I'm being waterboarded in the Enclave oil rig. Within a room, a random computer will be selected to be interacted with using the science skill. Using the computer in this way will give you rewards based on certain skills, if they are tagged and at least at 100%. There's an order to the madness, and you will only get one reward. For example, science is the first option, so if you have the science skill tagged and high enough, you will be rewarded with all the doors opening within the maze. Following science, you have repair, gambling, outdoorsman, throwing, first aid doctor, traps, and speech. So if your only tag skill moving down the list is speech, you'd get the speech reward, that being an alien blaster and ammo while skipping everything else. Once through, you end up in the section of the Enclave housing the President of the United States, as well as the Vice President and some important scientists we need to talk to. No, the President is not a computer this time. That was just in Fallout 3. Kind of funny how the Enclave stole the idea from the She, though. Maybe it's better to say that Bethesda stole the idea from Fallout 2. Before we move forward in dealing with the base as a whole, let's figure out what the Enclave is actually doing here. In order to make that happen, we can talk to the President of the United States. Don't worry, even if he realizes you aren't a member, which seems required, he doesn't seem to care or even call the guards on you. These guys are seriously stupid, or conceited, or both. President Dick Richardson, or Dick Dixon if you want to be funny about it, is the President of the United States of America and a weaselly-looking man in a suit. He can give a bit of a history lesson on how the Enclave came to be, starting with the Great War. A war that the Americans were apparently winning until the Reds, as he puts it, launched the nukes. Claiming this knocked the Chinese back into the Stone Age, you can mention it did the same with us, but the President will correct you, talking about how the USA planned ahead through the use of sanctuaries known as the vaults, allowing them to regrow while still having technology and resources available. When we point out that the vaults didn't work, we learn that this was intended, and that many of them were social experiments, with 13 being a control vault. These tests included vaults that only had men in them, some that didn't have enough food, and some that would open early. Various experiments to see how humanity would deal with horrible situations. This would get more comical in the later games, but almost all vaults seem to have been designed to offer essentially no chance at survival. While Vault 13 may have been a control vault, the President explains that it was more they were left there until the residents were necessary for use by the Enclave. Despite the issues with the water chip, this turned out to be fortuitous for the Enclave as they needed both freshly mutated and pure subjects for some tests they wanted to administer. Since the vault had to be open in order for the vault dweller to get a new water chip, and since they went off to find Arroyo, that meant 13 had pure samples and Arroyo had mutated ones due to the irradiated wasteland. Despite humans being, well, human in the wasteland, the Enclave does not see them as such. Instead, they consider anyone that has been subject to long-term radiation to be mutated life and lesser than. They are fascists and bigots. The President even calls these individuals stock rather than people. The reason they need this stock is for a project that will cleanse the entire globe of all mutated life, including the humans that live in the wasteland, as the Enclave see only their own members as pure and able to rebuild what is rightfully theirs. By finding the sample of FEV at the military base, the Enclave then had the key to creating this project. By repurposing the FEV, the Enclave changed the effects from a mutagen to create super soldiers for the Master into an airborne disease that would kill all mutated life, again, including all the humans that have not been inoculated against it. That's the crazy part, it doesn't just target mutated humans, it targets all humans and seemingly all mutants, meaning even the Enclave needs to have a form of vaccine administered before the release of it. Otherwise, they would just die along with everyone else. It's genocide, there's no other way of looking at it, even though I know people love to see genocide and see it as something else all the time. And there's no other reason for it other than those in power seeing the individuals of the wasteland as subhuman. America may have survived the war, but through that, they have become the Nazis of the future and of the wasteland. They want a pure society and will kill everyone to get it, even if those individuals mean them no harm. They don't care. To them, anyone else is a threat regardless and should be wiped from existence. To even be alive is an affront to the USA if you are different from them. The advantage of the virus is that it can be released from the oil rig and the jet stream will carry it worldwide, allowing it to kill everyone regardless of where they are. But to be sure it works, they test the virus on the Arroyo villagers due to their ancestry to vault dwellers and then test the inoculation on those that were kidnapped from 13 recently. It's very interesting listening to his reasoning for all of this. To save humanity. The President claims he wishes there was another way and that there isn't, but he never really explains why. Why does this save humanity? Why can't the Enclave get along with the humans in the wasteland? Is there something preventing that? No, there's no physical or biological issue truly preventing people from living together. They've been doing it for years. Doc Henry left the Enclave for the NCR and Myers left the Enclave for the Vagrants and nothing happened. There's nothing wrong. Nothing changes. Humans are just humans living in an irradiated world and they are no different from the Enclave. The fact he can't give you an actual reason for why this saves humanity is the point. There's no gray area here, no moral dilemma. The Enclave at their core are purely evil, bigots through and through. To them, saving humanity just means they are in power, because that's all this is. The Enclave, or America, doesn't like that they are not in charge anymore. They don't like that they do not hold all the cards. They want people to bow down to them, and so the only way to make that happen is to either force everyone in the wasteland to follow them or kill them all. They don't have the strength for something like a hostile takeover. If everyone allied against them, they would lose. So what do? They come up with an easier solution: chemical genocide. It's all about cowardice and power. They want to be in control, so they concoct some bullshit story about saving humanity and feed it to all of their own citizens. People are brought up with these beliefs so that they don't think what they are doing is wrong. Even the president seems to believe it. He's so sure of himself and is so sure he is saving humanity, but cannot tell you what is actually wrong with the humans of the wasteland other than them being different. He tells you, no price is too high for the survival of the human race. If you were human, you'd feel the same. He can talk to you and engage with you as if you are human, but at the end of the day, he doesn't perceive you as such. He is incapable of doing so. The president feels like this is a part of the job and feels no remorse, needs to make the tough decisions, even if those tough decisions are establishing power over others and, failing that, wiping them out entirely. Yet somehow he doesn't relish this decision. So what is he talking about here? There's no other way? Really? That's only due to the bigoted views of seeing radiated/mutated individuals as lesser than. Another way would be to coexist, and the Enclave knows this, but they refuse because they are bigoted Puritans, the new Nazis of the world. No price is too high for the survival of the human race. Brother, you can literally survive. You do not need to kill anyone to do so. What the hell are you talking about? A nice little tidbit of info is that no one has been inoculated as of yet. But this will change in a few hours. He doesn't think you can do anything to stop them, and so you aren't even worth dealing with. Unfortunately, that is his downfall. Despite not calling the guards on you, if you attack him, the entire base will be alerted to you and turn hostile. Instead, you can try to stealth kill him or feed him so many super stim packs that he overdoses. That's a surprisingly effective option, as he never seems to notice you doing this. Killing him isn't necessary, but it is important, as you can get his presidential access key, which we can use on some terminals, most importantly on the final boss. The Enclave is different from the Master. While both were trying to do something against the will of humanity, at least the Master was trying to turn everyone into something new for the better, at least in his eyes. To help everyone, even in his own twisted way. There was nuance to his actions, and while I believe his logic and methods are incredibly flawed, they were still leaps and bounds better than what America wants for the world here. They don't want change, and they don't want dismantling of power structures. They want to keep their power and influence to hold over people and will do anything to accomplish that. One-dimensional and therefore disappointing. There's just less to explore here, since all they are comically evil villains looking to kill everyone and everything for their own gain. That's fine in some games and stories, but Fallout set a precedent for being more than that, and so Fallout 2 feels like a regression. So we need to free our people and stop the Enclave from wiping out the globe, but how do we do that exactly? Well, there's a scientist nearby who we can get to see the light and convince him that what they are doing here is wrong, that humans are humans despite our differences. By convincing him of this, he will release the vaccine through the ventilation system to all of the prisoners in the cells above and administer it to us directly. He will then release the virus itself upon the entire base, throwing everyone into a panic. If you wait for enough time, almost everyone will die, except for those in power armor and some key individuals like the president, who I assume was already inoculated. Be careful though, to free the prisoners, we need to sabotage the reactor, and from what I understand, there are only two ways to do this. One way is to talk to another scientist and convince him to do it for you. However, if you release the virus, he will be too panicked to talk to you, leaving only one other option: blowing up the consoles in front of the reactor's mainframe. I believe you could potentially softlock yourself here. If you didn't bring any explosives with you, as you may not realize you need them, you will need to find some on the rig itself. Luckily, there are some to obtain if you backtrack, but they are limited. If you use them all for whatever reason, I am unsure how you would be able to progress, as you need explosives to do so. If I'm wrong about that, if there is another third option that I am unaware of, because I tried looking for one, please let me know. So without these explosives, you'd be stuck and would need to revert a save. A bit of a blind spot there, but Fallout is known for situations that lead to game overs that don't simply involve your character dying. You could have the residents of Vault 13 die because you took too long in Fallout 1 as an example. It's not the end of the world, but I did find this particular situation stressful and frustrating, as I wasn't sure if there would be any explosives to find here. Luckily there were. Disabling the reactor, much like in the last game, will cause a self-destruct sequence, giving us 10 real-time minutes to make our way back to the entrance. When we arrive at the foyer, we can find Sergeant Granite and a couple men, as well as Frank Corrigan, who is preventing our escape. You can convince Granite to turn on Frank and escape himself rather than dooming his team here, and he'll fight alongside you. This is just one way to make the final fight easier. If you have the presidential access key, you can also activate the turret system and turn them against the giant man, trivializing the fight further. Otherwise, it's quite the battle. In fact, I don't think I've ever completed it without this due to the amount of damage you take from Frank and the turrets together. Unlike Fallout 1, where you can deal with Mariposa and the Master through dialogue and subterfuge, Fallout 2 makes you take part in combat to finish the game. You have to perform an assault against Horrigan because there's no other way to do it. The only changes you can make are things that make the fight easier, but it's a fight nonetheless. Similar to how I compared the Master to the Enclave, the lack of nuance and exploration, we see more of that here. Combat is a necessary factor in Fallout 2, where that was rarely if ever the case in the first game. The worst part is that Frank isn't even that interesting. The real villain is the president, but you wouldn't think that with how much they tried to build up Frank by showing him to you constantly and watching him wipe out individuals on 3 separate occasions. You'd expect more from him than just muscle use to block your path at the end of the game, but no. He's just there to be a wall. Talking to him doesn't provide much of anything, just a bigot looking to kill muties and nothing more. Further disappointment for the end of the game. A boring and uninspired individual full of hate who hates us so much that even when we defeat him, he tries to take us with him. Nothing learned and nothing explored. The Enclave are just villains for villains' sake. While we can acknowledge the fascism and bigotry surrounding them, we don't really get to explore it at all. Don't get to see what made Frank this way. Don't get to learn more than what the Enclave believes. We can't make them see reason, and we can't get out of here without combat. It has to be this way. There's only one option, and in a game that is supposed to have a triangle of opportunities per task, at least usually, not having that for the finale feels like such a letdown. Once Frank is dead, we can finally make our way out of the tanker and escape, reuniting with the villagers of Arroyo and the dwellers of Vault 13, along with the vagrants, finally ending our story within the wasteland. For now. As is the case with the other Fallout games, we are met with some epilogue slides to explain how our actions have affected the wasteland. I'll let those play out now so you can see how things went for me specifically.
After the Enclave's destruction, the refugees of Arroyo and Vault 13 resettled, building a new community with the aid of the Garden of Eden creation kit. Finding themselves hundreds of miles from their vault, the members of Vault 13 chose to join the villagers in establishing a new community, and their technical expertise, combined with the villagers' survival skills, allowed the new settlement to grow and prosper. 2 generations of the same bloodline were reunited, and their savior, the Chosen One, became elder, presiding over the village in the years to come. Relations between the Slags and the residents of Modoc flourished. Between the 2 peoples, Modoc prospered and became a major farming community, supplying all the outlying regions with food. With Metzger gone, slavery disappeared from the area. Becky's casino bar grew quickly, and Rebecca Dyer's reputation as an honest casino and bar owner brought her the business needed to buy out her competition and expand. The den flourished, and it soon gained a reputation for being a tough but honest community. In the years following the destruction of the Enclave, Vault City continued to stagnate, choking on its own isolationism. Its Vault 8 generator, which was never intended to support such a large population, prevented Vault City's necessary expansion. Eventually, the city was absorbed by NCR, which had spread steadily northward since its founding. Less than a month after the Enclave's destruction, a mob war broke out in New Reno streets. The Rights, armed with an arsenal of weaponry that dated back to the pre-war years, leveled the casinos of the other families with rocket launchers. The mob war was clocked as lasting a little over 43 minutes, and when the smoke cleared, half of New Reno had been demolished. To this day, it is commonly taught that the Wright family were the founders of New Reno. Though the Wright family never completely recovered from Richard's death, the knowledge that their killer had been brought to justice eased their troubled sleep. Myron died less than a year after the defeat of the Enclave, stabbed by a Jet addict while drinking in the den. His discovery of Jet was quickly forgotten, and now there is no one who remembers his name. Optimizing Gecko's power plant became the first step in forging a spirit of cooperation between Gecko and Vault City. Gecko's increased power production became instrumental in helping Vault City's expansion. The harsh xenophobia of many of Vault City's leaders faded into obscurity, while Ghoul and Human labored side by side to create a center of learning and tolerance where once had stood only enmity and distrust. Several years after buying the excavator chip from the Chosen One, Marge LaBarge was able to purchase and control both the Morning Star and the newly opened Cocoa Reef mines. Marge was an easy choice for mayor, and using her new political power, she made Redding join the growing New California Republic in return for a seat in the NCR's Hall of Congress. With the destruction of the conspiracy to destroy the mutants, Broken Hills began to thrive. Then, the uranium ran out. The city, having lost its sole reason for existing, slowly dispersed. The residents carried their riches with them, leaving the place a windswept, desolate ghost town. A few holdouts remained, attempting to eke out a pathetic existence, but eventually, they too disappeared. Your help with Vault 15 launched the New California Republic's push to civilize its neighbors. Though there were many more obstacles to overcome, the NCR now had a foothold into the northern wastes. With the support of the New California Republic, the Vault 15 squatters soon became self-sufficient and productive members of society. By eliminating the death clause of Vault 13, you banished yet another species of the realms of extinction, proving once again that genocide is a viable solution to any problem. The She flourished, creating a botanical scourge on the radiation surrounding their beloved town. Though this vine could not grow in other soils, the She took care to nourish it in their lands. They continued to grow in strength and prominence, forming the basis of a new empire. The scientists grew tired of waiting for the Starfather to come for them or provide the fuel they needed. Using a cheap derivative fuel, they launched an abortive effort to reach the stars themselves. Their shuttle exploded moments after takeoff. As for the tanker vagrants, well, as vagrants do, they drifted on.
You'll notice that Vault City apparently stagnated despite setting up a deal between them and Gecko. This seems to be due to me not completing the quest between Weston of the NCR and Lynette of Vault City. Regardless of if you have them get help from Gecko or not, they will generally be occupied or absorbed by the NCR. Despite this, Gecko's slides explain that they managed to help with the expansion of Vault City that apparently didn't happen, and allowed the two towns to prosper while also breaking through the xenophobia that was present, so there seems to be possible inconsistencies between slides depending on your actions. Additionally, it claims that we eliminated the death clause of Vault 13, which just isn't the case. Finally, you were supposed to get slides about Harold's tree and his head growing longer, and about Marcus traveling east. The only requirement to get these seems to be them being alive, which they were, so I have no idea why they didn't show up for me. Unlike Fallout 1, you can continue playing after the events with the Enclave. There's a few things you can do after this, such as finding special power items that give you infinite experience. There's a terminal back at Vault City you can keep using for 20,000 experience per interaction, although it only worked once for me. And Father Tully back in Reno will give you a hint book, which raises all of your skills to 300%, while also giving you 10,000 experience per use infinitely. You can also get the grav plates for your car to upgrade it further. Some characters will have additional dialogue, like there's a woman in Reno that you can start dating as she said that you should return after beating the game. And you can also head back to the adult film studio to make a new, film. But with that, Fallout 2 is complete, and we are finally at the end. Looking at Fallout 2 as a whole, it's a mess. If you released a game like this nowadays, it'd be torn apart for the amount of bugs and issues that were left unresolved. It feels almost unacceptable to think this game was released in the state that it was. A rushed development along such a great shift in leadership almost spelled disaster for the entire thing. It was thanks to the rest of the developers here putting in countless hours that we even managed to get the final product at all. A game that is supposed to be bigger and better than the last ends up being bigger, but empty. Better in some ways and lackluster in others. A tonal shift from the original and filled to the brim with references and silliness that would continue on with the series as Bethesda took over. But as I said earlier, despite intent, Fallout in general has been a silly series, full of jokes and tonal shifts even with the original. The real shame is how empty everything feels, how little these characters can feel explored, how lackluster the Enclave is in comparison to the Master in Fallout 1. It's not the silliness that's the problem here, it's the lack of consistency, the lack of depth. If you make something too big, too wide, it lacks density. It's missing details. We have more companions, but barely anything to them aside from a select few. We have more areas with bigger maps, but empty buildings littered throughout. We have more weapons and armor without enough differences between them where decision making on what we should be using matters. There's always more in Fallout 2, but there is rarely anything better. Like I said at the beginning, Fallout 1 was a passion project with something to say, with interesting locations and themes to explore. Fallout 2, rather, is a selection of theme parks with a big bad that has no other purpose than being bad. Being a villain, being evil. It's sad, one-dimensional, and boring. It's less a game and more a product. Only in existence to make money and not for the love of what Fallout was or game development as a whole. It's a broken, disconnected experience and falters throughout many areas because of this. It's just a continuation for the sake of continuing, not to try anything new, not to experiment, not to actually be better. It's just the next step for the sake of stepping. It's hollow, it's missing something, and that something is character, passion, desire. This isn't a passion project with something to say, and that's its biggest flaw. It's a game about letting you do more in the Fallout universe, not really expanding on that universe and the themes associated with it properly. Fallout 2 could have been so much more if it had more time, more direction. If leadership hadn't disappeared, would the game have been better? Maybe. But they left because this wasn't what they wanted. Fallout 2 wasn't supposed to be at all, let alone be better than the original. The development pain, the crunch, the mistreatment. This game was doomed from the start. The fact it even came out at all feels like a miracle. But maybe that miracle isn't what it seems. Maybe Fallout 2 shouldn't have been released. Sometimes having something good and leaving it at that is bittersweet, but better than the alternative. Generally, the reason we get continuations on something that has ended is to make more money, more content for the masses. I don't think Fallout should be content. I think it was an experience and a message built on the passion of some dedicated individuals. I think anything after that is naturally worse in comparison. Sure, I love New Vegas, but did Fallout, as a piece of art, need that? Did it need Fallout 2? Do we need Fallout 5 and this new unnamed project from Obsidian that was announced after even more layoffs? I appreciate those games, but I don't need them. I don't think the original Fallout experience needed them either. I think that's why Fallout 2 falters. Despite those issues, Fallout 2 still offered a lot that I enjoyed. Retreading old ground after years of development in the Wasteland, meeting characters like Marcus and Sulik and Goris and more. New locations to explore, and new issues to involve yourself in. New concepts to challenge like isolationism, fascism. It's there for sure, even if it's spread out and shallow. War never changes, but Fallout 1 and 2 really try to give you examples of humanity rebuilding from nothing, and how many groups will grow and try to help others. While these lead to issues and flaws due to humanity, people never focus on how we are able to help, rebuild, and hope. I think that's a huge message here. Fallout 2 is an incredibly flawed piece of media, but what is good there shines brightly and leads to a fan base so dedicated that they won't even look at what came next. Entire communities revolve around these two games, continue to, and there's a reason for that. Because they love them. Because despite the issues, there's still good there. There's amazement there. Despite these issues, Fallout 2 changed lives, became iconic. It may never live up to its predecessor, but it still managed to stand out on its own, if only slightly. That's worthwhile. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much for making it to the end of the video. This is the Patreon section, and I'm going to go ahead and shout out the G-Rank patrons. You can also see them here, as well as the high-rank patrons. It's usually here. Shout out to Alberio, Gim, Dylan Delaney, Critical Link, Gloomerous, Backdraft 677, The Crawl, Metalhead Frank, Ashtray, Cyberworm, Strangely, Rosalio, and Mr. Janky. And a special shout out to Mr. Janky, who usually proofreads all my scripts, so big shout out to them. If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so through Patreon or just watching the videos. I don't really have YouTube memberships, but maybe I'll get that set up as well. By joining high rank, you can be here, and by joining G rank, I will shout you out. I'm also trying to update more on the Patreon so that you guys can like see the process or see like what I'm doing specifically. Trying to give more details than I do when I'm usually just talking on Blue Sky or on YouTube specifically. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next video.